Hey, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our second of this year's AAIP Continuing Legal Education webinars. Um, I'm gonna start off by just doing a little housekeeping as the stragglers continue to join. I think I was expecting around 60 or so people, and we're just about there. But So we've got a great show today. We've got a great guest today presenting for our continuing legal education webinar. We've got Carol Aragon Montgomery. Carol's going to talk about long-term care planning and CLDP business planning, and I'll let Carol tell you more about herself. She's presented before. She's a longtime member of AAIP. She's a certified legal document preparer, and we're very pleased to have her back. She's a great presenter. And then after Carol is done, I'm going to be presenting about the ins and outs of informal probate, really just probate issues in general. And then we'll wrap up today with an hour of of ethics, where I'm going to talk about the complaint process, the investigations, disciplinary proceedings, for Arizona Certified Legal Document Preparers. Couple little housekeeping things before we get started. First of all, as probably most of you know who have attended these webinars before, we really encourage participation. We encourage questions, comments. To do so, you can you can do it in a couple different ways. We'd love to have you raise your hand, and then we'll ask for your question or comment, or or you can also use the chat feature here with Teams to say whatever you're going to say, and I'll try to keep a lookout for those things, for comments in the chat, or people having their hands raised, so we can call upon you when it's appropriate during each segment of the webinar. And then Also, as those of you are aware that have attended the webinars before, I have a verification process that I use in order for you to get your certificate of attendance. It's a simple one, but you gotta be here the whole time. You have to pay attention to the process. So 3 times during the morning, and I'll give you a fair warning as I'm going to do this, but I'm going to raise up a random word, and you want to make note of what that word is, probably write it down. And then after the webinar has ended, email me the 3 words and I will respond with your certificate of completion. So I'll remind you of this as time goes on. And I'll go slow. I'll raise up the word. I'll show it on the camera. Please let me know if you can't see it. I'll read the word. I'll spell the word. So usually we don't have any issue with this. The other little housekeeping thing I want to comment on is that this has never happened before, but the last webinar, there was some issue with Microsoft Teams. It wasn't an issue with the way I set up the meeting, where normally if somebody drops out during the meeting, just for whatever reason, you have a bad connection, for example, and you drop out of the meeting and you then try to later re-enter the meeting, I'm notified of that. There's a little beep that goes off, and I see you waiting in the lobby, the virtual lobby, and I let you back in. Last meeting, for about an hour, I think, or maybe even a little more than that, that feature just stopped working, and I had no idea a few people had dropped out. So what I want to say is that during the meeting, if you if that happens to you and you're in the waiting room, and a few minutes have gone by and nobody said anything, please send me an email. And I have my emails up, so I'll notice that. I don't expect for that to happen, but I didn't expect it for it to happen last time either. Um, so Anyways, all right. So with all that in mind, we're going to get started in just a second. I do have one other little housekeeping thing to take care of. Somebody just sent me an email that did not get the link, so I'm going to send that link to that person, and then we will get started. So bear with me just a minute, and then I'll introduce Carol. Just a moment. Okay, so Carol, let me spotlight you so you can take over and we'll get started on your part of the webinar.
All right. Sounds good.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to introduce Carol. I always want to call you Carol Montgomery, Aragon
That's
Montgomery,
fine.
and Carol, you go ahead and take over, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Give me a little reaction if you're awake. Is anybody else awake? Let's see. Anybody know how to? Oh, got some hands. Nice, nice. Anybody want to do any hearts? Are they glad that I'm here? Well, good morning. Good morning. It feels awfully early. I don't know why. I know we normally start these things at 8 o'clock, but I think the dreariness of the sky just makes it feel like we should still be back in bed a little bit. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. I do have a PowerPoint for you guys, and we'll kind of go from there. Okay. All right. Can everybody see that okay? Awesome. Thanks, Don. All right. So today we're going to be talking about two different topics. We are going to start with long term care planning. And for those of you that have seen me before, I apologize. Some of it is a little redundant, but I'm going to do things just a smidge differently today. What I thought I would do is kind of take it to a different level today. Many times I come at this from the perspective of, let me just kind of give you the overview. What I'd like to do today is kind of take that a little notch higher in the sense that I want to really help you guys understand what it is that I'm looking at when I'm helping people through their long term care planning process. And so I have a whole presentation for you today, and then after we do that, I have a little surprise for you of what I'm going to do, and I hope you guys like it today. After we do 2 hours on long-term care planning, which probably feels like a lot, but let me tell you, most of my consultations run about 2 hours, so you're going to get kind of a feel of that. Then we're going to talk a little bit about your CLDP business and maybe some things that you might want to incorporate and think about in terms of your business and business planning. All right. So a little bit about my background. I have over 32 years of experience in this field, and that experience really started working as an Altex eligibility interviewer for Access. So Altex, we're going to talk about that a little bit more in detail today, but I started off as an eligibility interviewer, promoted fairly quickly. Within a couple of years, I was a supervisor over a unit. They saw that I really liked talking to people, and so they stuck me in the training unit. And I got a lot of years of experience helping people talk about Altex and train all the newbies that were coming in. And then the one of the last things that I got to do when I was with the state was I was chosen for what they call the Peaked team, which gave me an opportunity to share any process improvement tips and helping people make quality determinations. So that was a fun process, and we got nominated for an award, and that was really fun. Then I left the state to become a stay at home mom. But in that process, people kept on calling me and talking to me. So I did private consulting regarding Altex just with different people who would reach out to me. And then finally, a law firm reached out to me and said, "Hey, we've heard good things about you. Your name keeps popping up. Can you please come and teach us?" So I did. I started off teaching the lawyers about Altex and what they needed to know, what the background was, what the little minutia pieces were. And that law firm was like, "Oh, heck no, we don't want you teaching anybody else. Just teach us, come in and run our department." So I came in and did that for a while. Didn't always love everything about working in a law firm. Didn't have as much freedom to be me as I wanted to be. So I left and started my own business back in 2001. And as you can see, just been in business now for 22 years. So a lot of years of dealing with this topic. I actually went to a speaking engagement one time where I got up and I did my whole presentation. And then I sat down and went, "Wait a second. Did I say everything I was supposed to say?" I had just done it so many times that I didn't even actually remember saying the words out loud. And so that was kind of an interesting experience. So again, I don't know if you guys noticed on the first screen, but I put after my name my letters, my ABC letters, and my ABC letters stand for the three things that I mostly do here at my firm. One, of course, is being an Arizona certified legal document preparer. That's my A. My B is my broker. I am an insurance agent as well. And then C is I'm a consultant. So as you can see there, we do a lot of different things, and as we talk today, you'll see why I needed to kind of expand and not just be a CLDP or just be a consultant. All right, our agenda for today, I kind of alluded to that already. It's kind of funny how we do that. But our agenda is I'm going to take you through kind of what I take my customers through. I want you to have an education about the things that we do and how we do it, and understand kind of the foundational knowledge that a person needs to know. Then we're going to do an evaluation portion where I'm going to take an actual case that I'm working on right now and go through the questionnaire. I'm going to assess the need for the different programs. We're going to talk about spend down options, and then what kind of legal documents might a person need if they're going through one of these assessments. And then that real life case example, I'm going to then present options. These are the three pillars of my business. I'm a firm believer in educating people, evaluating their situation, and then presenting their options. As all of us probably do, we always remind folks that we're not attorneys, we can't give legal advice, but my job is to present all of the options that they would get, whether they went to an attorney or just decided to do it on their own, what all of the options are that are available to them, and then they can make the decision about what makes sense for them, and then they can direct me to do what they want me to do. So it makes it nice if by having that kind of pillar, those three pillars, it gives me plenty of information to make good decisions and to give people good information so they can make good decisions. All right. So in the chat feature, I don't know if all of you are connected to the chat or have that open. If you guys want to open that up, I want you guys to help me name ways to trigger the need for long-term care. What types of medical conditions are you seeing, or maybe have you heard about, or maybe you've experienced through a family member or through your own situation that would cause somebody to need some sort of long-term care? So in the chat feature, if you guys want to just plug in a couple of little pieces of information. I got Alzheimer's, dementia. Yes, exactly. Absolutely. Yep. We have some mental incapacitation. Yep. That's pretty common. Stroke. Very, very common, actually. Any kind of heart related condition is very, very common. What else? Anything else out there? Anything else you guys have heard about? Physical disability. Wow, Don, that's a serious one, right? Yep, addiction. We see that very often. Oh, I hope nobody's had to experience a broken back. I've heard that is just the worst. Needing help with your activities of daily living, disabled child. I like to talk about disabled children because a lot of times this is a perfect opportunity for us to kind of build our business, right? There's a whole grouping of people, parents that are dealing with disabled children. And that can be anything from an intellectual disability to a physical disability. Very nice, very nice. So loss of sight, dementia, very good. You guys know what I'm talking about here. So these are the things that most often come up in my line of work. As you can see, it's quite a lot. Many of these things were already talked about, but probably the one that always strikes me as amazing is diabetes. I get a lot of MS patients. Over the years, I've had some ALS patients. Back in the day, not so much, I haven't really had a lot of HIV/AIDS people lately, but back when they didn't have any kind of treatment for HIV/AIDS, I remember as a worker going out and doing those kind of appointments and talking with people in their homes because they couldn't make it to the office. Cancer, very common diagnosis that we have to deal with, end stage renal disease. They're just dealing with a lot of things. A lot of times what happens is people fall and that will trigger some sort of major catastrophic event for them, right? They're going to have some sort of issue, um, maybe a broken hip. Then they go into the hospital, they might get pneumonia. I speak from experience that happened to a family member of mine where they actually had a fall, broke a hip, got pneumonia. went into the rehab, and then died. So it was like a really crazy fast process. So you can see there's a lot that I deal with. Now imagine, these are all the things that are going on with people. And imagine that they're trying to figure out, well, what the heck? Now we have to pay for care. What do you think they're emotionally going through? Does anybody have any thoughts in the chat? What kinds of emotions do you think a family member is going through when their loved one has a stroke or has a heart attack, or maybe something happens and they're now vent dependent? Yep. Fear, stress, overwhelmed, confusion, denial. Yes, yes. Now I want you to imagine they're coming to me with all that. So part of my job is being a counselor for half the time that I'm meeting with people. Sometimes it's just calming people down enough to be able to listen and to take in new information. But you can imagine one of the stresses that I'm dealing with is I have very emotional people on one end, right? I have the customers coming to me, talking to me about all these things that are going on. And on the other end, I'm dealing with the programs with the eligibility staff who haven't been taught any type of empathy skills to deal with that. So it's kind of nice for me to be in the middle because I can kind of shield my customers from the what do you call it? The insensitivity, I guess would be a good word for it, the insensitivity of them not understanding, those eligibility workers not understanding. So that again brings me to my next question. How do you pay for long-term care? Well, I subcategorize this into pre-crisis and crisis options because if you're in a pre-crisis situation, you're going to have a few more options to put into place. But if you're in a crisis, you're already triggered something. You're probably not going to have as many options. So on the pre-crisis side of things, that's going to be people who maybe haven't been diagnosed necessarily with anything yet, but maybe something runs in their family, or maybe they're starting to see some signs of things. They might want to start thinking about these things in advance. The first one, of course, is self-insuring. And when I say self-insure, what I mean is that you're taking your hard-earned money and you're setting it aside for your future. Probably the statistic I hate the most is that 1 in 2 people are going to need some sort of long-term care in their lifetime. So look to your left, look to your right on the screen. One of you, right? One out of two is going to need some sort of long-term care. Now, sometimes that might mean it's a quick, you have a stroke and you die. Sometimes it's you have a stroke and you live. Sometimes it's you have Alzheimer's and you're alive for 10, 15, 20 years dealing with that condition. So it's important for us to start talking about this as young as possible so we can start putting aside money toward that cost because we know at least 1 in 2 of us is going to need that. So if you're married, it's either you or your spouse is going to need it. The second option is to kind of purchase some life insurance benefits. So a lot of policies out there are now including some of these types of benefits embedded into the product. So do talk with your financial planners, the people that work in that industry, and help them understand you want to plan for this type of a situation. Now, life insurance is again normally only paid upon death, but there sometimes can be some triggers in those policies which allow you access to the funds while you're alive so that you can deal with chronic illnesses. Okay. I'm not going to talk about these things here other than the accelerated death benefits, life settlements, and biaticals. I'm not seeing a lot of action in these anymore. When I first started in the industry, a lot of people were basically tapping into their life insurance policies, especially if they had huge cash surrender values, but they didn't want to lose the death benefit. They would basically sell their policy to get access to those funds ahead of time. I'm not really seeing this being used too much, maybe in other places, but not necessarily here. And probably the one that's most important is long-term care insurance. This industry has significantly decreased. The number of players that are in the long-term care world are low. That's a low number of insurers that are doing long-term care insurance because 1 in 2 people is going to need long-term care. So their statistics are not so great in their favor to make a profit. So the companies that are still doing it, any of the ones that have been around for a while, the ones that have good, they're making good decisions about who to take on, that's a good idea to try to do that and to do it as early as possible. I do have one person right now who started their policy in their 20s, and that's just because they worked in this world and they know how potentially significantly financially draining that would be. And so they chose to purchase long-term care insurance now, while it's really, really inexpensive in their 20s, so that they will have that for their life. And then another pre-crisis option would be a reverse mortgage. So you could take out equity in your home to help finance any type of long-term care. Now, generally speaking, there's not a lot of people that are coming to me for pre crisis. By the time they're coming to see me, most of them have already incurred some sort of a crisis. And by crisis, what I mean is they've already had a stroke, they've already been in an accident, they were already born with a disability. Something has happened already. And now they're just trying to come into me to try to figure out, well, how can I preserve as much as I can? Or how do I get qualified for some programs that can help me pay for it? So, the crisis options to pay for long term care include your personal assets, obviously, utilizing the money that you've worked so hard to save to help pay for the care that you need. This one is always kind of a touchy subject for a lot of people because many people have the idea that they've saved all this money to pass down to their heirs. And so, when they come to see me, I have to be that bearer of bad news that no, unfortunately, you're going to have to utilize some, potentially all of your resources before you can get some assistance, unless you've done planning significantly far in advance. Right now, the look back period for a lot of programs is 3 to 5 years. And so that means if you've given away money in the last 3 to 5 years, it's very possible that that's going to affect your eligibility today. So, but personal assets, I always tell people, especially when I'm talking with sons and daughters, it's important for them to remember mom and dad's money is for them, right? It's for their needs. And you're not going to stick them in some corner somewhere just because you want their money, right? You want to use their money to take advantage of giving them the care that they need and the care and dignity and respect that they deserve. So that's always a good one, to utilize their personal assets. The second would be help from family. And this one is kind of nice because every once in a while, doesn't happen again every day, but every once in a while, I do have family members who their sons or daughters are well to do, right? They're making really amazing money. And rather than that money just go for any willy-nilly thing, the kids are willing to step up and put in some of the dollars to allow that family member to live out whatever rest of their life is with dignity and respect. So that's always a good thing. The next thing is the Altex program. Oh, somebody has their mic on, so if you can mute yourself, that'd be great. All right, sorry, I was getting a little bit of feedback there. All right, so the next thing that I want to talk about as far as a crisis option is Altex. Some of you have heard this term, some of you have not. If you've seen me speak before, I speak about this a lot. That's the Arizona Long-Term Care System. And then there are also some veterans benefits that allow people to take advantage of some of the benefits, cash money that can come in to help pay for long-term care. And then also reverse mortgage. Excuse me. All right. So the first program that I want to talk about is the Altex program. And the Altex program is an acronym that stands for Arizona Long-Term Care System. It is a division of Access, which in Arizona is our Medicaid system, right? It's the big umbrella of Medicaid here in the state of Arizona. And Access stands for Arizona Healthcare Cost Containment System. I like to talk about why, right? Why don't they just call it Medicaid? That would make my life so much easier, but they don't. They call it Arizona Healthcare Cost Containment System because Arizona was the first state that decided to do their Medicaid program just a little bit different than all the other states. They wanted to contain the cost of care, of healthcare in the state of Arizona. So therefore, they came up with this very beautiful long acronym and name that they can use. So they're trying to contain the cost of healthcare in the state of Arizona. How were they going to do that? Well, the way that they decided to do that was under that HMO model. So many of you are familiar with HMOs in the insurance world, a health maintenance organization. And the goal of the health maintenance organization was to help contain costs of healthcare. So Arizona decided to utilize that model rather than paying on what they call a fee for service model where money was being paid out as the services incurred. They instead decided we're going to dish out X number of dollars every single month for every person that's on the program. And then we're going to hope that by doing that, those health plans are they're going to therefore going to take care of their members by providing preventative care, services, tests, and things of that nature to help them get what they need in the long run. Now, there's a lot of varying viewpoints on HMOs. Probably don't have enough time to get into that topic today, but I do want to just say that Arizona was the first. We are not the last program to decide to do it like that. Hawaii was another state that decided to model their Medicaid program after Access. Now, Altex, the long term care program, was specifically designed to pay for long term care and acute care expenses. Long term care is going to be those things like help with your activities of daily living by bringing in caregivers, home health aides, visiting nurses, things of that nature, and also nursing home level of care. In Arizona, we go one step further and we actually allow people to get care in assisted living. So that's another thing that is allowed in the long term care side of things. Acute care is what we just know as medical care, right? Going to the doctor, going to the hospital, lab work, x rays, things of that nature. So those are acute care expenses. So the long term care program is specifically designed to help the elderly, physically disabled, blind, and also the developmentally disabled. How I describe it to everybody is that you're basically a cradle to grave program. You can be born with a disability, and of course, you can die with a disability. So, at any stage in that lifetime, you could have any one of these things happen, and you need long term care. But in order to qualify for that government assistance, a person has to apply for the program. They have to meet non financial, medical, and financial guidelines. And then they have to enroll with the program contractor, which is just Altech's fancy name for health plan. The application process itself takes 45 days. So you can imagine if somebody just had a stroke and you don't have any money to pay for a nursing home, that 45 days might feel insurmountable. So let's talk a little bit about the non-financial guidelines. Not going to spend a ton of time on these. I want to kind of quickly peruse the non-financial guidelines because I think it's just important to touch on these ones. Probably the most important one on this screen is the approvable setting. Just making sure people are living in a place where the program can actually approve benefits, okay? So that's going to be at home, any home. You could be living in your home, a trailer, an apartment, your kid's home, wherever. You can live in a home, but you're at home. Or you can reside in a 24/7 care setting like an assisted living home or assisted living center or a skilled nursing facility. All of these settings here are managed by the Arizona Department of Health Services, and then they also have to be living in a place that accepts all tax. So that's going to be really important. Obviously, if you're in a penal institution, you're not going to qualify for all tax. You're going to go through whatever programs they have to pay for that kind of care. Third party liability is anything other than you that's helping pay for your medical expenses. So, generally, it's mostly going to be health insurance like Medicare, Medicare supplements, Medicare Advantage, but it can also be things like lawsuits and settlements. I did have a case one time where part of the settlement was that that entity had to pay for the medical care for a person for the rest of their life. That was a pretty amazing settlement, but that was something that we had to tap into. You have to be linked to the program through age or disability. Obviously, if you need the program, you're going to meet the criteria for disability. But if you're already on disability or you're over 65 or under 18, you meet the criteria as well. This area here, potential benefits, is probably the most critical part in the non-financial guidelines because Alltex is looking to see, is there any other money out there that you can tap into before you utilize our program? So they're pretty diligent in asking these questions, whether or not somebody served in the military during a wartime period, if they ever worked for federal, state, city, or county government, or for employers with pension plans. So what happens in this situation is when the answers to these questions are yes, then follow-up questions, right? So we have to ask, are you currently receiving those benefits? If you're not receiving those benefits, why? Are they still sitting out there? Could you qualify for them now? And so I like to bring this up because sometimes people don't know. I don't know if you guys run into this very often, but I know in my world, I ask this question and people don't always know the answer, right? They might have worked for the state, but they never necessarily paid attention. So I had a client one time, it was a husband, his wife was suffering from diabetes, and she had a pretty intense condition with her diabetes. She was pretty, she needed quite a lot of assistance by the time I got around to talking with them. But he was a SRP retiree. So when I got to the income section, he says, yeah, we both have Social Security. I have SRP pension. I said, oh, what did your wife do? Was she a stay-at-home mom or did she work? What was that? He goes, oh yeah, she worked in the school cafeteria. And I said, well, where's her pension? And he's like, she doesn't get one. I said, okay, well, did she work for public schools? Yeah, she worked there for 20 some years. And I said, she probably has benefits. And he said, no, she doesn't have any. I just have the pension, not her. And so I said, well, part of my process, if you hire me, is I'm going to look into that for you. So I did. I wrote to the state, and lo and behold, she had an Arizona State retirement account. It had $80,000 sitting in it. So he decided, I don't need Altex. I'm going to just use that money to take care of my wife. And he withdrew the application, withdrew the money, and used the money to take care of his wife rather than her having to go on state assistance. It was amazing, right? When I can find $80,000. It's not the only money I've found, but it's pretty amazing. So eventually after that, I was like, you know what? I need to put a little caveat in my contract that says if I find you $80,000, I get some money because that's a lot of work. All right. And then, of course, you have to verify your social security number. You have to be a US citizen or a qualified alien. So generally, if a person is on Medicare, this is automatic, right? They have to already prove that for Social Security and Medicare. So they automatically assume you're a qualified alien or a US citizen if you're on Medicare. And then the last three things on non-financial are marital status, Arizona residency, and identity. Of course, you have to prove that you are who you say you are. Again, if you're on Medicare, this is proven. You have to be living in Arizona. So you can apply while you're outside of Arizona. And especially because now the program, they don't have to physically go see you anymore. They've changed the rules where they can just do telephone interviews and telephone medical interviews. So you don't have to be here while they're doing the eligibility, but in order to approve the case, you have to be physically residing in the state of Arizona. The most common question I get here is how long? How long do they have to live in Arizona? So quick chat. Actually, you know what? Let's do React. Send me a heart if you think that they have to be here for 30 days. Nobody? Nobody thinks that? Oh, got some hearts. Nice, nice. All right. Send me a little applause if you think that they need to be here for 2 days. Nope. We got a little hand up. All right. Somebody says 90 days. Very good. Very good. All right. Give me a wow face, a surprised face if you now know that there is no minimum requirement. They literally could step off the plane, drive their car across the border, step here and say, I'm an Arizona resident, and they are. Any shocked faces for that? Somebody says, I hope not. No, that's really the rule. They literally can walk across the border, say, I'm an Arizona resident, and they meet the residency requirement. Now, obviously, if there's some question to that, Altex can ask for proof of that, like where are you living? Have you changed your driver's license? Things of that nature. But I've literally had people flown in, through airlift, through medical air transportation and moved into a nursing home. And that day they got approved. So kind of interesting. All right. And then marital status is really just looking at whether or not they are or are not married. Because if they are married, the rules are going to be different for married folks than it is for single individuals. Okay, so let's talk about the medical guidelines. On the medical side of things, Altex has, this program is very expensive. I don't know if any of you have ever dealt with long-term care, but long-term care is like a nursing home is an average of $9,000 a month. So it's an expensive program to administer. And so Altex has decided that they're going to have a medical guideline to determine eligibility. Their medical eligibility is called a pre-admission screening, or they call it the PASS for short, pre-admission screening or PASS. And a person has to score at least 60 points to medically qualify for the program. I was just talking with the lawyer in Minnesota last week, and he said their Medicaid program doesn't have a medical component. So we're trying to decide if the well spouse in our case, which is actually, she's not a well spouse, she's sick as well. She just hasn't passed Altex medical eligibility, whether or not that person should move to Minnesota so she can get on their program because her husband is qualified here because he had a long-term care condition as well. So it's interesting. Arizona has made it a little tougher. On the medical side of things, you have to be a person who requires medical monitoring, regular medical monitoring. You may have some sort of a cognitive impairment like Alzheimer's or dementia. You don't have to have that, but you may have it. You have maybe some issues, accidents, control issues with bowel and bladder, at risk of needing a skilled nursing care full time, impaired self-care with daily living, requiring the care of a nurse, and or having issues communicating their needs. So how do I explain this to people in layman's terms? Well, a person has to be either severely cognitively impaired, severely physically impaired, or some combination of the two of those things. Okay, so that's how a person can qualify. Now, today we're going to go through, I'll show you my little spreadsheet that I created. It's based off of the Altex policy, and I'll kind of talk you through some of the things that they're looking for so that if you do have a loved one or somebody that, maybe somebody's coming to you for help. I mean, I've had referrals. I see a lot of familiar names here who refer to me when they have things going on with their customers. But there may be a time when you need to understand a little bit more because this may be an area that rather than you sending them to me, it's something that you maybe could take on and maybe help educate people so that they understand. Now, it's not for the faint of heart. I will tell you that. It's a lot, but it's a good way to increase your income stream. Okay. All right. Third area is financial guidelines. And on the financial side of things, we're basically looking at three different areas. The first area is income. So obviously you're applying for government assistance. You have to be what we call needy, right? You have to need the program because you don't have the financial resources to pay for it yourself. So income is anything that they can use to obtain food or shelter. Normally it's going to be, either cash, currency, checks, or money orders, anything that they get in any form that they receive daily, weekly, biweekly, monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, or annually. Obviously, for most of my customers, it's going to be things like Social Security, pensions, annuitized annuities, things of that nature. Money that comes in on a regular basis that they're using to pay their bills. And the current income limit for a single applicant is $2,742 per month. Okay. Now, if a person's over this 2742, they're going to need what's known as a Miller Trust. It's also known as an income only trust. It's also known as an income cap trust. It has lots of names. So this is for people who are over this income limit. And you could literally be 1 penny over this limit. If you're 1 penny over, they're going to require you to create that income only trust to qualify for the program. Okay, so we can talk a little bit more about that as I get a little closer to the end of this. We'll chat about that a little bit more. Now, for married couples, remember earlier I said if you were a married person, the guidelines are a little bit different and they're a little bit greater. And that is just that as a couple, they can have up to 54.84 per month. And you'll notice it's just double that number there. Excuse me. All right. Now, question that I get very often is I sometimes do have clients, and I have several right now, where as a couple they're making more than this 54.84. So does that automatically disqualify them for the program? If they're over the 54.84 as a couple, how many people say yes? How many people say no? So let's raise hands for yes. You want to just raise your hand like you're going to ask a question. So people, I said yes, right? Yes, it disqualifies them. I have to remember what I said. All right. Yeah. So we have some yeses. Actually, it doesn't automatically disqualify them. So what Altex does in that situation is they take a look at the couple limit. Obviously, if they're over that, they're going to say, nope, you don't pass that test. So then the next test that they're going to do is they're going to look at the person that needs the program. If the person that needs the program's income is less than 2742, which is the single person limit, then they will income qualify for the program. But let's say that as a couple, they're over and the person who needs the program is over. Are they automatically disqualified? How many people say yes? Raise your hand if you think yes, they're automatically disqualified. Too bad, so sad. Go somewhere else to figure out your problems. Oh, I'm sad. I'm actually sad that we're getting yeses. No, they don't do that. They say if you're over the income limit as a couple and you're over the income limit as an individual, then you can use that income only trust to qualify for the program. There is a number that if they're over that number that they run the risk of not qualifying for the program, and that is if their income is greater than $8,912.20. And why do I pick that number out of the blue? Well, that's because in the state of Arizona, our average private pay rate for a skilled nursing facility is $8,912 and, oh, sorry, 70 cents. I didn't see the number clearly. So if your income is greater than 89,1270, then you could potentially not qualify with an income only trust. However, there's always an exception to that, right? If your cost of care is greater than that number and you still don't have enough money to private pay for your care, then in that situation, you can ask for an exception and somebody up in the upper ranks can decide, can we let this person still come on the program with the use of that income only trust? Okay. So there's always a way, right? If there's a will, there's a way. All right, let's switch topics to resources. So resources are anything that a person owns that can be used to obtain food or shelter. It can be cash-related assets, financial accounts at any institution, real property, personal property, life insurance, businesses, just anything you can imagine that you could own, mineral rights. I don't know. There's just a lot of different things that exist out there. All of those are going to be part of the resource or asset determination. Some types of resources are excluded and some are never excluded. So it just depends on your situation. And again, we're going to go through a scenario today where I'll kind of talk about that a little bit more. Now, the asset or resource limit for Altex has not changed in the 30 plus years that the program has been in existence. It's still $2,000. So a person cannot have more than $2,000 and qualify for this program. If they have more than $2,000, Altex will deny them and they'll have to reapply when they're getting close to $2,000. So this leads to an all-important question, right? And that question is, well, if they have 2,000, but the nursing home, let's say they have 10,000 and the nursing home is 9,000, how are they going to pay for it if they get down to 2,000, right? So it's all a matter of timing. It's really important for people to understand that you can apply while you have too much resources, as long as you'll be below the resource limit at some point within that first month that you apply. Now, there's a really big issue going on with Altex right now, and that is, and this is my personal opinion, the issue is that there's no empathy, and they're not teaching empathy because the Altex workers don't see people anymore. They never see your face. They only determine eligibility based on just data. And so for me, when it's one of my bones of contention with the agency is that they've lost that empathetic feel. So when a person comes to them and they have $10,000 in the bank, their first reaction is to deny them and make them go away and come back. Well, the problem with that is that if you start a 45-day application process, there's not a guarantee you're being seen on day one, right? You might not be seen until day 23 or day 30 of the application process. And so if all of a sudden now you're at day 30 and you've been waiting for your appointment to prove, to get in there to do the eligibility, and you don't know, right? Most people don't know this information off the top of their head. Then they come in and they go, oh, just kidding, you're denied now, and you have to start the application process over again. You can imagine how frustrating that is for a lot of individuals. So I always tell people, if you're running into a snag with Altex, and I'm happy to, and actually I'm happy to share this with you. I created a sheet which actually outlines the policy that says that they can't just deny you if you think that you can get spent down within the window of time. So if you can get spent down within that 45-day time frame, you can keep the application open. They don't have to just deny and keep restarting the application. So there's policy that says that, and believe me, I use it on a very regular basis. In fact, I have a pending case right now. They hired me after they did their Altex appointment, and we were already almost 30 days into the process, and I made them hold my case open. They didn't like it, but I was like, you can't deny, and if you deny, we'll appeal. So the family will appeal that process. So it's important to know, right? You got to know what you got to know. Now, the second number that's on the sheet here is the 2023 resource limit for married applicants. And I have a couple of different thoughts here that I want to share with you. One is the 31,724 that you see there is the initial resource test. Why do I say initial? Because if a couple has less than 31,724 in assets right now, they are underneath the resource limit as it is right now. They don't have to go through extra hoopla to qualify for the program. But married applicants may be able to have as much as $148,000 and still qualify. And we're going to talk through that in just a few minutes, okay? I'll explain how that works. All right. The last thing on the financial guidelines that I want to touch on is the transfers. So transfers means that you have sold, traded, transferred, or given away money, vehicles, property, or income, right? And you may have received compensation or you may not have received compensation for that. So the way that Altex looks at that is they view everything as a transfer, and it's gotten significantly worse in the past probably 3 years, because they have this thing, and I kind of highlighted it down here, this Altex asset verification system. This AVS system actually goes out into the internet and does matches with the social security number at major financial institutions, and they will come back and they will do a 5-year spreadsheet which tells you what the balances in those accounts were for the past 5 years. Well, where can this become an issue? Well, the issue, and you'll see on when I start going through my questionnaire and my spreadsheets, you're going to see what I'm talking about here. What they're looking for is any major activity that's happened in the past 5 years. They want to know about it. And so this is right now, this is kicking most people's behinds. Almost all the denials that are happening right now are happening because people can't provide documentation fast enough to explain these transfers. So Altex is looking back the full 5 years to determine, did you give away something in the past that you could have used to pay for your care? And if you did, they're going to penalize you. Now, that's not to say that you did give away something. It's just maybe you sold a house and you got money and the money came into your bank account and that's what you've been living off of. That can happen, absolutely. But what they're looking for there is that's going to trigger some documentation, right? So if all of a sudden you had a deposit of $100,000 into your bank account, they want to know the source of that deposit and did you keep that? If there was a $5,000 check written, who did you write that $5,000 check to? Was it for a bill or an expense, or was it just because you wanted to give your kids $5,000, right? So they're looking for all of those types of things. The main thing here is when you don't receive full value, right here. If you didn't receive full value, you get a penalty period, and they calculate that based on the average cost. See, there's that 89,1270 again. The average cost in a nursing home in the state of Arizona. Okay, so they penalize you based on this number here. So if you gave away $9,000, you're going to be ineligible for approximately a month and a few days. Okay, just so you can kind of get an idea how that works. This, people, is really, it's kicking people's behinds. I'm telling you. I had a case that they went to somebody else, another planner, who started doing all text, but they're new, right? They didn't understand how this all worked. And they got a 30-month penalty because of that transfer, bunch of transfers. But when I took a look at the case, because I have experience and I have background and knowledge and I know what is and isn't a transfer after all these years, I was actually able to help them with the appeal process. They did the appeal. I just helped facilitate information for them. And when I talked with the Altex people, I said, here's the policy that we're going to use. Here's the documentation. And we knocked that penalty period down to 2 months. So she was able to get her care much sooner than 30 months. All right. Now, let me go back to that just for one more thing here. When I say penalty, what that means is they have to meet all the other criteria. So everything else we've outlined before this moment, they have to meet all that criteria with the exception of maybe there's a transfer with the penalty. In that situation, Altex doesn't deny the case. They don't say, oh, you have a transfer, we're not going to approve you. They actually will approve you and start the penalty period. During that time where you're waiting out your penalty period, they actually do give you acute care or medical benefits. So you do get some benefit by still going through the process. You just don't get help with long-term care. That doesn't make most people happy, but at least they get something. They don't get nothing. They do get some benefit. All right. So remember, I promised I would talk more about the married couples. So let me talk about that right
Carol,
now. Yeah. Yeah.
if I could interrupt, I think we had a couple questions. We got a couple
Oh,
hands
yes.
up, like Kevin.
Okay.
Why don't we start with Kevin and then go to Angelica? Go ahead, Kevin. Or do we have, is that a question?
It might be just a hand that was left up
Oh,
from a
okay.
previous discussion,
And
but
then
that's okay. If there are questions, I'm happy. We can stop right now and I can answer a few questions.
John Kroger, do you have a question?
Oh, yes. So I'm guessing what you mean by this is what's the smallest amount, right?
Yeah,
Am I
that's correct. Is there an amount
okay?
they don't bother to question, like $1,000 transfer, or do they go all the way down and pick up $50 transfers and say, "Oh, we're adding that back"?
So what they're doing right now, and again, it depends on the eligibility worker. I have some eligibility workers who are extraordinarily pains in my side. Let's just say that, where they question, I've literally had a worker who asked me for 5 years worth of bank statements. I don't know why they would want to have that much work. It's a lot of work. I pull 5 years of statements for my clients. So I have some that ask me about every single transaction on 5 years worth of statements. I have others that only go with the flag transfer sheet. So on the asset verification system, it actually flags which months they want you to ask about. And most of the time, it's going to be transfers, usually where there's significant deposits or significant declines. When I say significant, that can be as little as 1,000, but most of the time it's around that 5,000 mark is what I see as the flagged months. They can flag any month. So they can say, well, you had, there's a $1,000 difference between last month to this month. They can actually ask for both of those statements to see what did you spend that $1,000 on. So, but mostly I'm seeing it for bigger chunks than that. Now, once they get the statements, right? So they can ask for the statements on all your accounts for that particular month. So let's say it's August of 2020. So you would have to give them the statements that cover August 1st through August 31st of that year. And they would look at those 1 to 2 statements, depending on how your bank splits your statements, and they look at every single transaction on that statement. If you can verify all of them with the exception of $500 or less, then all of it will be compensated basically, except for, let's say, $500. So I have a case like that right now where we have some months where we know that he gave like a $50 donation. We have some random little miscellaneous things like that. But every other transaction on that statement was a bill or an expense, right? Like utilities or something like that. So we're able to show that all of those activities are normal, his normal spending, with the exception of this $50 gift. That's less than $500. So then I use the policy to exclude that $50 gift so it doesn't count against them. Now, for a lot of people, Christmas is a big time when they give money away, right? They'll write out a bunch of checks to everybody or send money to people. So I always look at December. December tends to be a very common month where we see chunks of money greater than $500 being given. So for example, in my one client, he gave away $100 to every single one of his grandchildren. Well, there was 13 grandchildren, so it was $1,300 in 1 month. That would count against him because it all happened in 1 month. Does that help?
Yeah, the follow-up question, I have a lot of customers that regularly tithe, and I mean genuinely tithe, as in a full 10% of their income. Over 5
Yes.
years,
It's a lot.
could be a substantial amount. Are you suggesting that that's going to get added back and therefore penalized for a waiting period?
I'm not suggesting it. I'm telling you it will be.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
if it's more than $500 in any one given month, it's going to count against them. Now, there are some caveats to that, right? Because so for that one lady that I told you where she came in to me with a 30-month penalty, and I was able to reduce her penalty period. One of the things that I was able to do in that case was there's a section of policy that says if you had something happen and there was no way you could have known that you were going to have a long-term care issue at the time you gave away the gift. So for example, that in that particular case, she had not been diagnosed with Alzheimer's or dementia in her case until I think she was diagnosed in 2021. And so we had the documentation from the neurologist that said she was not diagnosed until 2021. So everything prior to that date, we didn't know what she was doing, right? She didn't even know what she was doing. We just thought that she was acting crazy. We didn't know that she actually had dementia. So once we got the dementia diagnosis, we were able to prove that everything prior to that was not done with the intention of qualifying for Medicaid. She was just doing it to do it, right? That's what people do. So if there's something that triggers it like that, we can sometimes use that policy to offset some of those transfers. Now, I have a case right now where the family is like, well, there was stuff happening in the past and we didn't know till recently that she had Alzheimer's. I said, well, yeah, but that in that particular case, that's not actually what the records reflect. The medical records actually reflected that she had some form of dementia back 4 years ago. And so I said, I can try to get the ones prior to the 4 years, the fifth year excluded, but everything from that point forward is going to be a conflict. We can't say we didn't know she had dementia. She had a diagnosis in her chart that already indicated she had dementia. So in that one, we're not going to be able to argue that one as like we did the other one. Does that help?
Certainly.
Okay.
We may have a couple other questions. Kevin, did you have a question?
It's actually Amelia.
No, sorry, I didn't have a question.
Okay, you wouldn't have known. I
think I maybe just hit the hand up.
Okay, I was just
Go ahead, Amelia.
Yeah, do they make allowances for, elder abuse or instances where family members may have been taking money from, the person who's applying, or talk to the person into cashing out, or helping them buy a house, that type of thing? Because I think that's becoming, more and more frequent with this aging population. Yeah, is that hard?
Yeah.
That would, I imagine, be hard to prove.
Yeah. So in that situation, again, the main policy that I use pretty often is going to be the one where we had a sudden onset, right? A sudden onset, like a stroke. So if somebody did a $50,000 gift to their kids to buy a house when they were well, and then 2 weeks from now had a massive stroke, there's no way somebody can anticipate they're going to have a stroke, right? They don't know when that's going to happen. They might be ill, they might have some high cholesterol or whatever, but they don't necessarily know when they're going to have a stroke. So in that situation, we could potentially get that $50,000 excluded because they didn't know they were going to have a stroke 2 weeks later, right? As an example, or 2 years later. But for most people, if we don't have that sudden onset, it's going to be really hard to prove that they didn't know, especially, if they have some significant illness like diabetes and, something like that, or end-stage renal disease or something of that nature. If it's not sudden onset, it's going to be hard to prove that. So yes, those are all going to count against people. And what I always tell people, and I just had a call with a lady this week about that, it's important for you to consult about that, right? Because we need to know the exact parameters by which all this stuff happened, and are there any potential options there, right? We might have a disabled adult child that they gave money to. That's going to be a very significant case than I just gave money to my random kid or grandchild. Okay. Now,
Yeah.
talking about elder abuse, they have to be willing to file a police report for it. If they're not willing to file a police report, it cannot be excluded. They have to be willing to press charges against the person who did theft against them. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
I'm going to go on. Yeah, absolutely. And when we go through my spreadsheets and everything today, you guys will kind of see what I'm talking about. I have an actual case, somebody that we actually interviewed, and I'm not putting any identifying information on there, but you guys will be able to see an actual case and kind of what we saw when we're talking to them. All right, going back to the financial guidelines for married applicants, Arizona is a community property state. Therefore, all resources of both spouses count in the All-Tex resource eligibility determination. What always comes up in this situation is second, third, or more marriages, right? Where somebody's gotten married multiple times and maybe they have kids from a prior marriage and they're like, I don't want my money to have to go to pay for my current spouse just because I'm married to them. Well, it doesn't matter. In Arizona, Arizona's community property state. So when All-Tex is looking at eligibility, they are looking at the resources of both spouses. It doesn't matter whose name is on that. They consider half belonging to the person applying and half belonging to the spouse, to the community spouse. So critically important thing here, I have a lot of people who will say things to me like, well, should they get a divorce, right? Well, obviously, I feel like that's getting awfully close to legal advice. So I don't ever tell people that they should or shouldn't get a divorce. What I say is consult first. Let me understand the scenario. You may be in a situation where we can preserve all the assets, and you're in a situation where the numbers make sense to preserve assets rather than getting a divorce. Or I did have a case where the gentleman was wealthy. I mean, the person he married had no money. She literally had less than $10,000 to her name when he married her, but he himself was very well to do. Even though they had a prenup, in his case, he did seek legal counsel from an attorney, and an attorney told him, yep, I think it's a good idea for you to get divorced. They did, and we got her qualified. Now, he didn't leave her hanging. He's still with her. He's still taking care of her, but he just went ahead and got divorced because he wanted to preserve his wealth and not have her not qualify just because he was wealthy. But I have other cases where, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense for them to go through that hoopla to get a divorce if there's other ways we can preserve those assets. Okay. And one of the questions was, will All-Tex honor a prenup? No, they do not. And then would a legal separation work? No. They have to be divorced for them not to count the assets of both spouses. Okay. All right. So if the All-Tex applicant's spouse resides in the community and they can verify marital status, they can have their eligibility determined using community spouse rules. That is a key word here, community spouse. The spouse has to be living in the community. Now, a community can be assisted living. They don't have to be at home, but it does have to be a person who's living not in a nursing home. The thing that All-Tex has to do is they first have to determine the first time the All-Tex applicant received care for 30 consecutive days. Okay, so I'll give my sample that I'm going to go through with you guys in a little bit. We have multiple 30 continuous period days. So we're going to talk about that and how that affects the case. What we're looking for, though, is the first time the Altex applicant received care. Okay, next, we're going to add together all the countable resources of the people of the assets owned by both spouses at that time, at the time of the first continuous period of institutionalization, not today. We're going to look at today, but that's our different reason. That's just to determine, do they qualify today? But to determine how much they had back in the day when that person first needed care, that number is going to be critically important to our case. Okay. All right. And then next, we're going to add together all the countable resources of the spouses. Then we're going to divide that in half. If the half falls between the low number, the 29,724, which is the minimum CSRD, the minimum community spouse resource deduction, and the maximum resource deduction, the community spouse gets to keep half plus $2,000. The rest must be spent down before the Altex applicant will qualify. If the half is greater than 148,000, they can keep the 148 plus 2,000 and the rest must be spent. And if it's less than 29,000, they get to keep at least the 29,000. And I'm going to give you some examples so you can kind of see how the numbers work here. So example one, they come to me with $400,000 in resources. We divide it in half. The spousal half is 200,000. We compare that to the minimum limit and the maximum limit for the community spouse resource deduction, the CSRD. And in this case, 200,000 is greater than 148,000. So the spouse can keep 148,000, the customer gets to keep 2,000, and they have to spend the rest before they can qualify for the program. Everybody following? All right, in my example 2, they have $200,000 in assets. Divided in half is 100,000. So the spousal share is 100,000. Oops, sorry. We compare that to the minimum and maximum, the 29,000 and the 148. Their half is between there. So the spouse gets to keep 100,000, customer gets to keep 2, and they have to spend 98 to qualify. Making sense? The third example is they have $40,000 in assets. We divide it by 2. The spousal half is 20. Compare it to the minimum CSRD and the maximum CSRD. This 20,000 is below 29,000. So the spouse gets to keep 29,000, customer gets to keep 2, and their spend down is 8276. So you can see how this significantly impacts the case, right? So this case, they're ready, right? Example 3, they're ready to roll. Example 2, they have a little bit of spend down. And example 1, they have a lot of spend down. Okay. All right, we're going to switch. I'm going to keep on going because I have still a lot more to cover. Obviously, I have 2 hours, but I still want to try to make sure I keep it within that 2-hour time frame here. All Altex members must contribute toward the cost of their care. All right, all Altex members must contribute toward the cost of their care. Altex begins with the total gross monthly income, then subtracts the allowable deductions, and the remainder is their cost of care. There are 2 terminologies that you need to know. One is that people in a skilled nursing facility are going to be paying what they call a share of cost, and that share of cost is assessed by Altex. For members that live in assisted living homes or assisted living facilities, the contribution is called room and board, and that number is calculated by the case manager through the program contractor, which is the fancy name for health plan, okay? So this is important to remember because Altex is changing these numbers, and the case manager is the one changing these numbers. If people use an income-only trust or a Miller trust to qualify for Altex, they may have both a share of cost and a room and board payment, okay? So it's important to remember that they're going to have 2 numbers that they're playing with. All right. These are some general deductions from share of cost and room and board. There are more than these, but this is generally what we see on a more consistent basis. P&A, which is the personal needs allowance, SISMIA, or community spouse monthly income allowance, and then premiums for health insurance premiums. So medical, dental, vision, hearing, whatever they're covering. I have a client that has a denture policy. So they allow that as a deduction as well. So personal needs allowance for people who are living in assisted living or a nursing home is only going to be $137.10 a month. And for people who are living in the community, they get the income limit, which is $27.42. Okay. And again, in my spreadsheets, I'm going to show you a share of cost worksheet that my husband and I developed to help our customers understand how it all works. All right, what are the benefits of the Altex program? The benefits are that Altex covers the acute care, which we talked about. They cover long-term care, and then they also cover some extra things. They cover Medicare Part A premiums if they're QIMBY eligible. We're not talking about QIMBY today, but just know it's an extra program that's out there that can help pay for Medicare costs. Altex covers their Medicare Part B premiums. So for people living at home, this is going to free up another almost $165 a month out of their check that they get to keep. Altex also can cover their Medicare deductibles and coinsurance if they have no other coverage, right? So if they're on a Medicare Advantage, it's not really covering that because they're on Medicare Advantage. But if they are just on Medicare, Altex will kind of basically be like a supplement. It'll cover those deductibles and coinsurance. And then it also covers their Medicare Part D premium up to $42.60. That's this year's subsidy. Additionally, people who are on Medicaid, aka Altex, it entitles them to the extra help subsidy, also known as LIS or low income subsidy through Social Security. This helps pay Part D premiums. Again, I put those little asterisks there because it's up to a certain amount depending on your low income subsidy level, and it lowers the out of pocket costs for one's prescriptions. Okay, so there's a huge benefit to that. NACOA, or National Council on Aging, puts out this lovely little grid, which is so helpful. I love this. I pass this out like candy. It just explains what full low-income subsidy extra help is for 2023 and what partial low-income subsidy help is. So if you have people that meet these criteria, you might want to encourage them to apply for the LIS program. This is an automatic benefit of being on Medicaid. Everybody who's on Medicare gets this, and Medicaid gets this. You can see here, though, that it really significantly reduces, sorry, I keep on clicking. It reduces the copays. So their generic copays are $1.45, their brand name copays are $4.30, and when they're in the catastrophic level, they pay $0, right? It's very nice. Also, they have no donut hole like regular people do. All right, I'm going to briefly touch on the veterans and veterans widows benefits. This is not an area that I practice in, right? You have to be an accredited agent with the Veterans Administration to actually help people with their applications. Now, back in the day, VA used to always let us help people with this part. The thing is that I know a lot, probably way more than I should know, just because I got trained by the Veterans Administration on how to do this. So I'm actually gonna go through a spreadsheet that I created to show you kind of how the eligibility works. I'm not gonna go into all the minutia, but I will say that this program is very different from Altex. Altex covers the medical costs, right? They don't give you money to pay for your medical care. What they do is they say, hey, if you qualify for our program, we'll help you pay for your medical care. With the veteran and veteran widows benefits programs, the pension and aid and attendance, they're literally giving the veteran or widow cash, and they can use that cash to then help subsidize their care or medical care costs. Okay, so that's going to be the difference between the programs. So here are the key questions to ask. Are you a veteran or are you a widow of a veteran? Did you serve during a wartime period? Do you have 90 days of active duty? Were you honorably discharged? Do you have low assets or resources, or low income or high income and high medical expenses? Are you blind or disabled, or do you need help with your ADLs? Now, I say low assets or resources here, but that has really changed. The resource limit for VA benefits is $150,000. That's what they consider low, okay? So again, they're looking at income, they're looking at resources. And then the key thing that I want to point out is home property that's on less than or equal to 2 acres is excluded, whether they're living in it or not, okay? So that's going to be an important distinction. Veterans benefits do have a transfer or look back period as well. Their look back period is 3 years. Their penalty rate, you can see, is significantly less than Medicaid, right? So if the person doesn't qualify because of a transfer, they're going to calculate that penalty based on this number. But they do have a maximum penalty of only 5 years. The value of the VA pension benefits vary depending upon your situation. Veterans can receive from 0 up to 2229. Married veterans can receive 0 to 2642, and widows can receive 0 to 1432. And that's per month. And why is there a range? Because it's based on other circumstances. So Veterans Administration doesn't just have a flat number if you're over or under. They look at other things to calculate whether you're over or under. And again, I have a worksheet. I'm going to kind of show you guys that in a few minutes. Medicare. So one of the other things that we do here is also look at people's Medicare insurance, because if there's a way for us to kind of boost their benefits by getting them on a plan that's better suited to them, we're going to do that. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because, again, I want to go to my worksheets and I want you guys to be able to see what I'm doing with some cases. But the big point here is that our Medicare planning services are free, right? Every year they have an opportunity to change their Medicare Advantage plan or to make some different decisions for their Medicare, and those services are always free. So I encourage people to consider working with an agent so that you can understand, right? No cost help. You have somebody to call when you have issues. We work for the customer. Even though we're representing the companies, our job is not to just pick one company, right? The one thing that we do is we are always trying to figure out how can we best help the customer. For example, we have a customer in New Mexico right now, and everybody is telling him that he needs to not use a particular company, right? A particular company to get his benefits. So we presented to him a different idea that you could do this instead. And he's going to choose to go with that company anyway, because that's the primary provider in that area. He's not necessarily going to take our direction on that or our guidance, but it's not about us. It's about what he wants, right? Whatever he wants. We're going to present all the options that make sense to him, and then he can make a decision. I also like this real life experiences to help people navigate their choices, dealing with people who are retiring, understanding the market. In the Medicare world, we're required to annually recertify. So we don't just get our license once and then just take our CEs as we want. We have to take specific recertification and testing every single year in the Medicare world. And then my favorite thing to do is get their birthday cards ready. So I always send out a birthday card every single year, and my customers love their birthday cards. When they don't get them, they tell me, hey, I didn't get my birthday card this year. All right, so I'm licensed in Arizona and Minnesota. George is just continually getting further and further away. He does Arizona, New Mexico, Minnesota, South Carolina, and Texas. All right, some quick things that I want to talk about on the legal document side of things, and that is that it's so very important for people to have their legal document ducks in a row. I know that you guys are all CLDPs, but I don't know that the statistic is any better for us than it is for the general population. And that is that only 1 in 4 people have their legal documents done. I hope as CLDPs that our numbers are greater than 1 in 4, but that's the average for Arizona, and it's terrible. So we have a lot of work to do, because if only 1 in 4 have them, that means 3 out of 4 are available for us to tap into, right? We can go out and seek out those customers and help them get their legal documents done. I am a big proponent, a big soapbox person for if you're 18 or over, you should have something. A financial power of attorney, a medical power of attorney, a living will. You need to have at a bare minimum these things in place. So I seriously encourage people to do that. Estate planning. For relating to Altex, it's going to be very important for people to have their planning redone after their Altex VA approval or while they're in the process of that. We're going to talk about that today when I go through my customer's case. The well spouse first death planning. So if the person who's living in the community, the well spouse, what we consider the well spouse, is still living, but they die first, now all of a sudden your Altex applicant or member is going to be disqualified from the program. How do we prepare for that? Deeds, removing houses from trusts. People, quit just randomly doing stuff. You need to understand what you're doing if you're dealing with an Altex customer. I've literally had an attorney tell somebody to take their house out of their trust to qualify for Altex. What that attorney did not understand is that Altex does that first continuous period to establish what the resources were. And in order for that house to help them get the maximum spousal deduction, they needed the house in the trust and they took it out before. So they didn't qualify. They had more spend down that they had to do. Bad. That was bad advice. That person should not have done that if they didn't have the information. So just understanding when it needs to be done. Income only trust. I want to plant the seed in you guys and I want it to grow and blossom. Please, no. Income only trusts, Miller trusts, are for income eligibility issues only. Let me stick that in your brain one more time. Income only trusts and Miller trusts are for income eligibility issues only. I cannot tell you how many phone calls I receive on a regular basis that tell me they want to do a Miller trust to protect their assets. That is not what this trust is for, and we need to get that out of our language. We need to be very clear in helping people understand what a Miller trust is. It is not used to save assets, and assets other than the bank account assigned to it are not allowed to be part of the trust. Only the bank account where the income goes into, and you have to open a new one. You can't use a current account that they're currently using. It's very, very particular, very, very important we understand this. Disabled under 65 Special Treatment Trust. So Altex has a section of policy which allows people who are disabled and under the age of 65 to create a special treatment trust. What does that mean? That special treatment trust means that if you put assets into that trust, they are excluded from the eligibility $2,000 resource limit. Okay, it's a great, great tool to use. However, Altex is the beneficiary of that trust. So before they start doing stuff like this, they need to understand the pros and cons of what they're doing. Absolutely, it is a good tool, but is it for everybody? No, not everybody wants to do this. And they just need to understand the pros and cons before they make a decision. Now, obviously, my job is not to tell people what to do. It's to educate them so that they understand the pros and cons. And then from that information, they can tell me, yes, Carol, we want to do it anyway, or no, we changed our mind. Okay? And then special needs trust planning. This is helping families before crisis happens. And I will tell you this year, or not this year, well, last year, I just had an inordinate amount of customers that came to me where sisters or brothers were helping their disabled adult brothers or sisters with something. Mom or dad died, and now we have money that we have to deal with. People didn't do trust in advance. Now they're getting disqualified from benefits. I mean, it was chaos last year. I don't know what was going on in the world last year, but lots of special needs people that were coming to me. Now, the problem is that if you are a person that has a special needs child, even if they're an adult child, they're 50, 60 years old, and you're still alive and you're taking care of them, we need to make sure that planning is set up before you die so that they don't get disqualified because they inherit a bunch of money and now they can just spend the money however they want because nobody's in control of it, right? Sometimes that's not a good thing for them to all of a sudden inherit $100,000 or even $50,000. So working with special needs kids, setting aside funding for people with disabilities, special needs, making sure they still qualify for Medicaid. Super important to do this type of planning. I encourage you all to consider thinking about that. And then I want to point out ABLE accounts because very, very often, many people were saying they needed to do this disabled under 65 special treatment trust. But ABLE passed a law that people can actually set aside some funds in financial account. And many of those funds, that can be a lot of money that's set aside. It works very similarly to that special treatment trust, but it's without the need of a trust, right? So an ABLE account. If you don't know what that is, Google it. ablenow.org, I think, is the website. So it's a very good opportunity for people to do that. All right, so I know that I have here questions, comments, suggestions, feedback. I want to open the floor for just a few minutes to talk about any questions on that part of the presentation. Anybody have any questions on that? You can do it verbally with your sound, or you can type messages in the chat feature. Sorry, we go through so much. I have so much to say. I don't know about you guys, but it's early in the morning, right? Who wants this much data in their brain cells?
Yeah, and it's great information. It is a lot to process, for sure. And Carol, before you go on to the next topic, after anybody that has a question asks the question, I'm going to do the first verification word. But it looks like John's asking, what are countable assets for qualification?
Okay, so generally speaking, countable assets are going to be anything in financial accounts. So checking, savings, IRAs, investment accounts, 401ks, anything of that nature. It's also going to be things like life insurance, cash surrender value, second properties, land, more than one vehicle, things of that nature. And you'll see the questionnaire that I use is based on the Altex policy. And so there is a plethora of assets to ask about. Yeah, and we can kind of chat about that when I go into my questionnaire. I'll go into that in a little bit more detail. So pretty much everything, houses are typically excluded, but only if they're not in a trust. And if they have to be in the state of Arizona. So you can't have a house in Texas because if you intend to return to Texas, then you're not an Arizona resident, right? You have to be in Arizona and intend to stay here.
Okay, a couple other questions.
Yeah. I got it.
I can read
Can
them
you
if
repeat?
you got it?
I
Go
got it.
ahead.
Yeah. Says, can you repeat the income limitations for access for singles and for married? So the income limit for a single individual is $2,742 per month. For a married couple is $5,484 per month. And again, if they're over those numbers, they could have multiple tests they go through. And then if they're still over, need an income only trust or a Miller trust to qualify. Next question. Are they taking the houses more often now after the person dies? I'm not seeing that they're just so slow at everything that they're doing. I don't deal with a lot of people that don't have planning in place. So if my customers come to me and they have a home, we're doing some planning to try to protect those assets as much as possible. They are not really going after anybody who inherits through a beneficiary deed. So the only time that I'm really seeing them really kind of go after the homes is if the person was in a nursing home. If they go into a nursing home for 90 days or more, and that's can be most people will stay there really for the rest of their lives. They can put a TEFRA lien on the property. What a TEFRA lien does is it just says if you sell or get rid of this house, we're going to get our money back, right? We're going to get some of our money back through the sale of that property. So if they're going into a skilled nursing facility, they automatically put that TEFRA lien on after 90 days. In that situation, yes, that lien is going to be on there. So then the title company will know that there's an access lien. And then next question, can you say more? Let's see, can you say more about the benefits of leaving a house in a trust? So the only time that we're really leaving houses in trust, at least during the application process, is only going to be when they have to have their CSRD created. So their community spouse resource deduction, when we're trying to get a higher amount, to trying to get them as close to the maximum that they can keep. That's generally when we're going to leave the house in a trust. Then in order to qualify, we would have to take the house out of the trust because we don't want it to continue to be a countable asset. The only other situation where I've seen where leaving the house in the trust didn't matter was when a person had a reverse mortgage where the reverse mortgage balance was greater than the value of the house because we had that dip in our values a while back. In that situation, it didn't make sense to take that house out of the trust. I had a worker tell me that they were going to deny the case. And I'm like, but the equity is zero. So it doesn't matter. We can leave the house in the trust. So that would be the only other time. And then income limit is always gross income limit. So anytime you're seeing a Social Security deposit, if they're not on any type of Medicaid program getting that help with their Medicare premium, you're going to add back the current premium amount, which is $164.90, to calculate whether or not they're over or under those limits. So you'll take their deposit amount, add back their premium. Sometimes people have taxes withheld, or they might also have their Medicare Part D premium subtracted from their Social Security payment. So it's really important for people to look at those Social Security benefit letters to see what the gross amount is. Okay. All right. Anything else? Okay, so I'm going to tackle the next thing. So bear with me for just a second.
Oh,
So
I'm sorry,
this-
Carol. Can I do the
Oh,
first
sorry, give your, yes,
verification word?
yes,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
All right. And Carol, if you would let me know, make sure that everybody can see. So the first verification word is CUP, C-U-P. It's CUP.
Good.
You want to write this down. You want to write this down and make sure that this, along with, there will be two other verification words that I'll give you before the day or before the class is done. And you want to email me those three words at the end, and I will respond with your certificate of completion. So the first word is CUP. And I believe that everybody, yeah, everybody that's registers is on board. So, all right. So I will hand it back over to Carol. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, guys. So I'm going to share information with you because, eventually one of these days I would like to retire. So I'm hoping that somebody will gather enough courage to decide that this is something that they might want to tackle. I will tell you, working in the Altex planning field is complex. I was trying to explain it to somebody the other day, and I said, you basically have to be an expert, semi-expert in everything. You've got to know how everything works, because if you don't, you can miss opportunities. I'm definitely not an expert in everything, but I know a lot. And sometimes I spew data and I'm like, wow, how in the heck did I even have that in my brain? Sometimes I cite policy and it's verbatim. It's crazy. I don't try to do that intentionally, but it does happen. All right, so this is an Excel spreadsheet that my husband and I created just to help me kind of keep track of things and to make some of my work a little bit easier, so that automatically does calculate things like eligibility and share of cost and things of that nature. So this particular page, obviously I deleted all the specific data for this particular customer because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't, giving away too much data there. The details of this case are exact. So, what they own, their situation is exact. Now, there's a couple of pages that didn't apply to them, so I pulled data from another case and input that data just so that you guys could have a look at the kinds of things that I'm doing. So obviously, demographic data is just your normal stuff, right? My questionnaires, whether it's paper or the digital version, are all going to have all kinds of questions about their names, their dates of birth. Initially, I don't ask them for their social security number, but I will need that if I'm going to be applying for Altex for them, their gender, race. These are all questions on the Altex application, so I still ask all of them of every client. Marital status, fiscal county is just the county that's going to be paying for the program. For that particular customer. So if they live in Pinal County will be their fiscal county. If they live in Maricopa, it'll be Maricopa. Sometimes they leave a county, right? So let's say that the person has a home in Pinal, but they come to Maricopa County for care because there's more providers here. They still might have a fiscal county of Pinal. Okay, so that means that they have to work with the Pinal program contractors, not necessarily Maricopa. Few years ago, they changed. They're all the same now. So Pinal, Pima, and Maricopa all have all three health plans available. Again, they have to be an Arizona resident. What's their living arrangement? Remember, we said earlier that they had to be living in an appropriate living arrangement. This is going to be an example of that. We have to put what that is, the facility name, contact information, so on and so forth. This particular case is a spousal case that I'm going to be talking about with you. And remember, I said we needed to look for the first continuous period of institutionalization. So I'm always asking what their living arrangements were. I always go back 5 years because Altex has literally asked me for rent receipts from a person where they lived 3 years ago. They wanted to confirm information. So the look back is 5 years. You need the living arrangement for 5 years. For spousal cases, though, the community spouse rules changed in September of 1989. So when I'm asking for their living arrangements, I'm actually looking for their first continuous period of institutionalization dating back to September of 1989. Now, have I had situations where they had an institutionalization back in 1995? I have. And I will tell you that there's no friggin' way, unless that person kept amazing records, that we could go back to 1995 and put that case together. So I will tell you that I will disclose the information, but I usually ask Altex not to use that information because I can't get data. No, I don't know anybody. I'm probably the only person who has my bank statements back to 1995 because I'm just that crazy. But we're looking for first continuous period. In this particular person's case, I just narrowed down their information. Normally, I would do begin and end dates for every single thing. This person had a cervical fusion operation, was in the hospital and rehab at Barrows back in August of 2021. If you see there, August 25th to September 25th, that is 30 consecutive days. It's actually 31, but 30 consecutive days. Then they told me that they had 5 days at Honor Health in Deer Valley and 4 weeks at Encompass Rehab in December of 21 to January of 22. So that's another period of institutionalization. And they most recently had pneumonia and RSV with a discharge out to physical therapy, occupational therapy of this year. They did apply for a Altex private pass in September of last year, but they were denied medically for the program at that point. But if you can look at this here, just by asking these questions, you can clearly identify that this was the first time that that person needed care. So this is the period of time that I have to go back to determine what the assets were back then so we can calculate the spousal share. Okay, super important. The next thing that Altex asks about is any kind of legal representation. So if a person has a guardian or a conservator, we do need to put that information here so that we can make sure that we have the proper authorization from the proper people to represent them. I ask a lot of legal-based questions. Obviously, my business is threefold, right? I do Altex planning, I do Medicare insurance, and I do legal document preparation. So I ask a lot of questions. I really do this no matter why they come to me because it just triggers a lot of conversation. And sometimes we find out things just by asking some additional questions. I ask a lot about what legal documents they have in place. And I can tell you this area here is where I find a lot of extra work, right? Somebody might come to me for Altex, but I can see that there's a need here for some documents. So these people have power of attorney, only one of them has financial. They both have a medical power of attorney, no mental health care power of attorney. They do have a living will. They do have a last will and testament, but they don't have any type of other estate planning, excuse me, or beneficiary deed. So this opens up a lot of conversation for me to talk to people about what things they might want to consider putting into place. And as we progress, you'll see some information that I'm going to share with this particular customer. They have one child, or one of the spouses has one child. And one of the questions that I ask for Altex purposes is if that child is under 21, if they're blind, disabled, or seriously mentally ill, because that can give me some planning opportunity there, not only for legal documents, but also planning in terms of spend down and how to restructure some assets. I talk about their marriages. This particular couple has only been married to each other. And then again, just asking some questions about what kinds of things that they might want to put into place or what things might already be in place. It's just helping me to try to put together a picture of this customer. All right. The next thing that I talk about is their health insurance, or what's also known as TPL, third-party liability. Again, I want to talk about what do they have, what don't they have. This could be an opportunity for some change. If you notice, both of them have Medicare Advantage plans, right? I will tell you the Altex program contractors are United Healthcare, Mercy Care Plan, and Banner University. So this person has Cigna. It's very possible that when they get approved for the program, they're going to want to switch to what they call a DSNP, or a dual special needs plan. Under Altex, the 3 health plans have their own dual special needs plan that coordinate with the Altex health plan. So this flags me as some opportunity to have some discussions with them. Every year, they're going to need to be reevaluated to see if their plan makes sense for them. So again, just opportunities. I'm looking for opportunities not only to grow my business, but also how can I help this customer, right? Is there something that they don't know? Are there opportunities that they're missing out on? For example, this customer happens to be 61 years old, this particular one over here on this side, and she will have the opportunity at age 65 to enroll in a Medicare supplement plan, which normally has underwriting, but at age 65 does not have any underwriting. So it's opportunities, right? Now, I will say this person's probably going to be on Altex before she turns 65. We're going to get her on Altex this year. So I cannot sell her a Medicare supplement once she's on Medicaid, because Medicaid basically will act like a Medicare supplement and she could get it for free. She doesn't need to pay for it. But if she wants to stay on a Medicare Advantage plan, we might want to see if there's one that's going to be has more comprehensive benefits that coordinate with her Altex plan. Okay. I can see here that there's no long-term care policies for the well spouse. If she's healthy enough, that might be something we might want to look at there. All right, so we talked about potential benefits. Remember, I mentioned on the education portion that we would need to ask some questions about whether or not there's any potential benefits. So we're looking for workers' comp, veterans or widows benefits, any accidents or injuries, any kind of employer with pension plan or government, and then whether or not I asked those questions. So they're already receiving everything that they're entitled to. There was nothing weird or unusual that I needed to follow up on. These are the wartime periods that Altex is looking at. So remember on that question, I said they had to have 90 days of active duty with at least one time during a wartime period. That's going to be applicable to people for these war times. So World War II, Korea, in-country advisor for Vietnam, and Vietnam. The rules change for people who are in a different war, the more recent wars. So from August 2nd of 1990 to now, we've basically been at war, right? We've had a lot of wars going on. So those individuals, the rules are going to change to 24 months of active duty with 1 day during a wartime period. So this is for individuals right now, because we're seeing a lot of people in the Korea and Vietnam era right now. Not as many World War II vets as there once was. Most of them have passed on, but periodically I see them. I have some elderly clients in their 90s, so we do get a few of those still. Okay. And then the next thing that we're going to be looking at, trusts, and then we're going to be looking at transfers. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the trusts, kind of giving away a little cue here. This person is going to need an income-only trust, and I'll show you why in a minute. And then one of the other things that I talk about with my customers is the need to do planning, new estate planning after the person gets on the program. They've decided to hire me now to go ahead and start the process of getting those paperworks done, because after we get the one spouse on the program, we don't want her to inherit a bunch of money just because her well spouse dies. Okay, so super important to remember that. I am going to be saying her a lot because this particular couple happens to be a lesbian couple. So just know that it is a her marriage, not a his/her marriage. So I promise I'm talking about the right person. All right, and then transfers. All right, so we have a kind of an interesting scenario here. This person sold a piece of property in a different state. That property was not owned just by my customer and the spouse, but also a third person, a cousin was also on that deed. So when I'm calculating their numbers, I have to calculate it on 2/3 ownership instead of 100% ownership. The current market value of the property was $209,900, but they only sold the property for $200,000. So we can already see that there is a small period of ineligibility that's going to happen because they didn't sell it for current market value. Everybody see those numbers? Okay. So in this particular case, there was a debt on the property. So I did take the value, subtract the debt, divide it by 3, and then multiplied that number by 2. So their net amount that they would have received would have been this $41,657. Okay. But we have about $6,600 of uncompensated value because of that, right? And you can see here, we took the uncompensated value, divided it by the average private pay rate to come up with the penalty period of 0.74 months. Does everybody see that? Any questions on that? So this is what I mean by having the right tools, right? I don't have to sit and manually calculate this out anymore. I just told the machine to do it, and now it can calculate it for me. I do have to periodically go do weird things like this where I have to go, okay, well, this one is this percentage and this one's that percentage, and doing all these kind of things. Now, in the process of calculating eligibility and stuff like that, I did notice that they have a 2022 Acura. So one of the questions that I did ask verbally but had not written it down was, what car did they have before this? Because obviously that's a fairly new car, and that would be within the last 5 years. Did they sell their other car? Did they trade it in on this car? What happened to it? Okay. That's just an example of one of the transfers. All right, so let's talk about assets. Remember I said that the Community Spouse Resource Assessment needed to be August of 2021? Sorry, somebody has their mic on. Will you mute yourself, please? Thank you. It's just hard. I keep hearing my feedback in my ears. All right. Again, everybody, please mute yourself. We can hear people in the background.
I'm looking for who it may be.
Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. All right. So in this particular case, obviously, when I went through my questionnaire, these are all the questions that I'm asking. So when somebody asked, what are the assets? What are the things that you're looking at? These are all the things that I ask about, right? Whenever I'm talking to people. And even though there's no specific section in policy that talks about PayPal, GoFundMe, Cash App, Venmo, those are all covered under accounts because those are all financial accounts. So I still have to ask those kinds of questions because obviously if somebody has a PayPal account, they can keep money in their PayPal account. They don't have to zero it out all the time. Same thing with your Cash App and your Venmo. You can have money just sitting in those accounts. So obviously, as time goes on, things get more complicated and more things have to be added. But primarily, I'm looking for anything of value, anything that they own or co-own. And here's a thing that comes up very often here is money held by others. So I do have sometimes people say, well, I took $20,000 out of my brother's account so I could hold it for him. So that would be $20,000 that would be count for your brother because you're holding it for him. So it's either going to be an asset or it's going to be a transfer. So you have to pick which category you want to put it in. And then the other thing that comes up quite often is parents adding their names to their kids' accounts or kids adding their parents to their account. This one can cause quite a lot of chaos because we'll have, like I had a case recently where the daughter and the mom were on the account. The mom was the one needing care. And the daughter, this was her account from when she was prior to 18. So she'd had this account her whole entire life and she had just never removed her mom from her account. So we had to prove that that account was actually not my customer's account and we had to remove the mom's name off that account so that Altex wouldn't count that against her. But you can see there's quite a lot of things that I'm asking about here, right? And then all the real property and then personal property. People laugh at me when I say, do you have an airplane? But I've literally had clients with airplanes, so I still ask the question. I also get a lot of people who get funny with the cash on hand. They're like, well, why do they need to know about that? And the reason why is because some people keep a lot of cash on hand. I skipped this question one time with the client and he called me on it. He's like, Carol, you didn't ask me if I had any cash on hand. I said, well, so and so, how much cash on hand do you have? He goes, I have $40,000. I'm like, that was a big miss. So $40,000 he had stashed in his house, hanging on to that. So I don't skip questions anymore. I really do ask about all the different things that are going on. All right, so in this case here, you can see that these people have 2 checking accounts. They have 3 savings accounts. They have an investment account. They have an IRA. They have life insurance, home property, and a vehicle. Now, there was a couple of things that were different in August of 2021. Obviously, they had that house that they sold last year. Remember, we mentioned that they sold a house last year, right here. So I added that back, and then they also had a vehicle, some other vehicle that I need to talk about. So this vehicle won't necessarily be here, right? It'll be a did not own. And then here it'll be did not own, as an example. So I just put little cues in for me to calculate things. So CSRA stands for Community Spouse Resource Assessment. Here are the community spouse standards. These are those numbers that I talked about in the presentation. 29,724 is the minimum community spouse resource deduction, and the maximum is the 148,620. So you'll notice here that all the assets, the things that I have numbers for, right now, these are all estimates because they haven't gotten me all the bank statements yet. But even if I just based it on what they currently have, right? We have the TD Ameritrade was a little bit more. That one I had the statement on, and then I have the information on the property. So I was able to estimate that they had roughly $310,000. They're going to get the maximum CSRD because when we take the 310 and divide it by 2, it's more than 148. Now we're going to look at what they have as of February 2023. Their assets are around 247,000. We subtract the 148. And the remaining total is $98,000. So when I calculate whether or not they're eligible, there's the resource limit, right? We already deducted the spousal share. Now we're subtracting the resource limit. They have to spend down approximately $96,000 to qualify for the Altex program, okay? Now, something else that I cued into is they had 310. Now they only have 247. So what happened to that $63,000? So there's going to be more questions. I know there's going to be some flag transfers because there's $63,000 already gone. All right, just to kind of give you an idea. Anybody have any thoughts or questions so far? Did I lose anybody yet? A lot of people covered their screens. I don't know if they all went to take a break. They all went to go get a snack, maybe get some coffee. Any questions? I always have to tease because I always think if nobody has questions, am I just that good? No, there's got to be lots of questions. All right, so there is a question. What is the difference between hiding assets and planning? So I love this question because the Altex application that we have to sign, and I'm the authorized representative. I actually become the authorized representative for people. So when I sign the application, I'm signing, but I have my customers also sign this on my firm fee agreement. And that is that we are being truthful in our answers, right? I swear under penalty of perjury that I'm telling the truth, right? And that I have not knowingly withheld or given false information to qualify for the program. So that's the difference, I think, between hiding and planning. Hiding means you're trying to get away with something. You're trying to not tell somebody something so that you can get approved. And people try to do that all the time. I will tell you, I had a consultation with a lady one time who she was trying to qualify herself, and she had inherited a house from her mom. Her mom had died. The house was still in her mom's trust, and she had left it in the trust intentionally because she didn't want to disclose that to the Altex program that she had this second house. And I said, well, you have to. You inherited it. It's yours according to the trust provisions. You can put it in your name at any time. It doesn't have to stay in the trust. It's not in a protected trust. It's not, it wasn't in a trust where she didn't have control of it. She had 100% control. And I said, you have to disclose it. And she said, but I don't want to. And I said, well, I can't work with you. I have to disclose the truth. you want to represent yourself and lie, that's your own prerogative. That's not for me. I can't do that. My life, I'm not willing to lie for anybody. So planning is about putting into place tools and resources that help you qualify for the program. So for example, this particular customer has decided that they want to do a SPIA, a single premium immediate annuity. That's going to create an income stream for the well spouse, and will spend down that asset very quickly. We're still in the planning processes of that, but just to give you an example, that's something that we have to disclose. We have to tell them about the SPIA. And again, it's going to get flagged, right? Because they're going to say, well, you had $247,000. Now you don't have $247,000. What happened to that money? So planning is just about utilizing resources, tools, and policy to the customer's advantage. How can we use that and still stay within the guidelines? All right, so you have a customer coming to see you who's on disability under the age of 65. She wants to talk about estate planning. Is it advisable that I refer her to someone like you to talk about benefits available to her? That is an excellent question, Mary. I'm assuming it's Mary that's on there. Those are great opportunities for us, right? Because we want to make sure she understands the consequences of everything that she's doing. And are there some resources and tools that she doesn't know about? Maybe she doesn't know about the Altex program. Maybe she needs that extra assistance and she's paying for it, right? And maybe she could qualify with some help and with some planning. Now, again, somebody who's under 65 doesn't necessarily mean that they need is just because they're on disability doesn't mean they need long-term care. They have some form of disability. It could be serious mental illness. Altex doesn't cover serious mental illness, so that's not going to be a benefit to going on that program, but she needs to understand, and I think that would be a great referral. Yeah, absolutely. All right, everybody understanding the numbers and how I'm calculating them here. Is there anything that I lost somebody on these? Now you can see here the little dashes that I put in here. Those dashes just mean that those assets are excluded, right? So we had a question earlier was which ones are excluded and which ones are counted. You can see in this situation, everything in this situation is counted with the exception of the life insurance, home property, and vehicle, right? The house is not in a trust right now, so it's excluded. So all these are excluded and all of these are countable. USOPM Figley is term insurance. If a person had a regular life insurance policy and the face value was greater than $1,500, that cash surrender value is going to count against them. So I have a lot of people who have like $10,000 policies, right? And those $10,000 policies might have cash surrender value of 200 or 600 or 2,000 or something, right? They might have some value. So then that would count over here. Now, Altex does allow you to designate some funds for burial. So let's just say, for example, that we wanted to take this savings account here. Obviously, they don't keep a lot of money in this account. If they don't want to go buy a prepaid burial plan or a cremation plan, or they don't want to use an irrevocable trust to get some monies excluded here, we could actually take one of their savings accounts that they're not really using and plop $3,000 into that account and designate it for burial, because there's a $1,500 burial fund exclusion per person. So each spouse can have 1,500 designated. They could also buy a prepaid burial plan. That's a good way to spend down their resources. As long as it's over, if it's over 1,500, it needs to be irrevocable. If it's under 1,500, it can be revocable. And then Arizona does allow you to put up to $9,000 in an irrevocable funeral trust. That is something that I'm contracted to do. So sometimes I do have clients that like that irrevocable funeral trust because they don't have to go pick anything. They can just wait to pick things when the person dies. But either way works. I have a lot of people prepay their burials and cremations. Okay. Now, this particular customer, I will tell you, I know what part of this $63,000 spend down is, and that's because they paid off their car. They bought this 2022 Acura, and they had debt on it. They had a car loan on it. It was about $41,000 was what they had for the payoff. So I know $41,000 of this was the payoff for this car. So I've already dug a little bit to kind of get that because this was pretty new. And so we're able to ask the question, is there debt on it? And they told me that it did have debt. And their financial planner went ahead and had them pay it off. Now, my concern with that, of course, is the financial planner did some actions, right? They spent at least $63,000 without making sure that this number was set, right? We didn't have this number yet. I didn't have this month yet until I met with them recently. So sometimes it's good to pay things off. That's a great thing to use, but sometimes we want to plan that. If this person did not get this maximum CSRD and they had already spent it, then it might have affected their numbers, right? So we just want to always check on those kinds of things.
Carol, I think you have
All
a
right.
few questions in the chat.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. First question, where are you getting the information for the full market value? And in this particular question for the property is the tax valuation. Yes, it is the full market value on the tax valuation. That is all tax policy. The only time that number is not going to work is if they recently purchased the house and we have the sale agreement, which says what they actually purchased the house for. So that contradicts the cash value or the full market value on the house, or the full cash value on the house. And so, but we use, most of the time, the tax valuation is almost always to our advantage. So we use that quite often. Again, only if things deviate from there. Now, it's important to know, like this house here, you can see the value went up pretty significantly from 2021 to 2023. Right now, the current home equity limit, and again, equity, not value, home equity limit is $636,000. So I do have a client right now that has a $1.1 million house. It's a big value property, but he has a reverse mortgage on it for $610,000. So the equity in his house is less than that 636. So he still qualifies for the program. Okay. What is the best way for a low income person to plan? Is there a good website or nonprofit where they don't pay up front? So low income does not necessarily mean low asset. That's kind of a tough question, Allison, and only because I don't know enough about their situation. I would say it's important for us as CLDPs, as far as understanding things. This might be a good opportunity for to take this information that you've learned today and use it to maybe add that as a consulting option for you when you guys are meeting with your clients, because we do tend to see a lot of lower income customers. I don't know about you guys, but my draw a lot of times is my all text. So I get some clients that sometimes have some money, but on my lower, for just legal documents, a lot of people will refer to me just because I will provide low cost and free options for people as well. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. I would say the NOLO website is a really great website for documents, obviously, for people to understand. They also have a lot of good information about Medicaid planning there. And I'm going to throw out a name. I read some of her books. She's not my favorite planner, but Susie Orman also talks about Medicaid planning in her books. So there's a lot of great resources that are for free, or you can check out a book in the library or something like that. But make yourselves available, right? Learn enough to be helpful, right? Give them the information they need. So good websites to get more familiar with these topics. Access's website is great. They actually have, obviously their manual is public knowledge, so you can actually review their policy and procedures. It references the federal and state statutes as well. So if you ever want to do a little bit more digging to understand how all that works, especially like Miller Trusts and income only trusts, special treatment trusts, those are great resources. Whenever I get stuck, that's what I do. I just go find that information. Does applying through Healthy Arizona Plus give a decent message about what programs are available to them? So Healthy Arizona Plus is not for all techs. They don't do all techs there. All techs is too complicated of a program. They are working on trying to make it accessible through that system, but it is not currently accessible through that system. So yeah, unfortunately, that's not a great place for them. Now, Healthy Arizona, as well as the Access websites, do outline all of the different available health access programs, right? So you can actually go and it'll talk about members, applicants. It'll tell you about every program, what the guidelines are, what the income limits are. It's all there. Their site is actually really, really helpful. And I'm finding that a lot of Medicaid sites are. So I get a lot of calls. People come to me for one thing, and then they'll like, oh, Carol, I have a friend in Idaho that needs to understand their program there. So I'll do a little research for them. And there's a lot of really great Medicaid sites out there, you guys. They're trying to do a really good job of giving that information to people. Okay. And then a profile of a typical paying client. So I get everybody, right? I get a lot of consultations. I would say the average type of person who's going to want to meet with somebody like me is somebody who has some resources, right? They want to preserve something. They want to try to utilize the rules to their advantage. So they're going to have some resources, or they're going to need that income only trust to qualify. So that's the other thing that I see quite often is individuals that kind of start out with me thinking that they just want the income only trust. But then when I start talking to them and getting more information, then they're like, oh, I probably need to meet with you and talk about more things. So I will tell you, I'm not cheap. There was a time when I offered a lot of free stuff, but my business got really, really, really busy when I did free. So free consultations and things like that. So I'm not free. I charge $180 an hour for my consultations. Most of my initial consultations are 2 hours or more. I have actually, the education portion that you guys just saw, I actually record that and put it available so people can watch that on their own time, because my consultations were getting up to 3 hours and I just needed them to do that kind of on their own time. I still educate people about that, but I try to have them watch the free video rather than me spewing for an hour about that. But I'm digging, right? I'm digging into a lot of data, and I take a lot of time with my clients. It's not about me just quoting a fee. It's about me trying to make sure I understand the situation is something that I could get involved in. I've met with people who are multimillionaires, and I will tell you, I'm not really interested in getting millionaires on Medicaid, right? So my client that has the $1 million house, he's not a millionaire. He has $600,000 of debt on that house. So he does have some money. Everything else is gone. He needed an income only trust. So we did an income only trust for them and have helped them through that. But yeah, so I'm not cheap, $180 an hour. I charge for my legal docs consultations, you guys, because I feel like not everybody who's coming to me is going to actually hire me to do something, right? Sometimes they just need to know. Nobody's explained things to them, or maybe they are not the kind of person that likes to internet research. They just want to meet with the person, and that's okay. But I charge for all my consultations. The only thing we do not charge for is Medicare, because we're not allowed to. But if I could, I would probably charge for that too, because it's a lot of work. But so $180 an hour. When somebody hires me to help them with Altex planning, that fee is going to range. My fees start at $4,000 and they go up from there. So I'm going to show you guys in the CLDP side of things, I'm going to show you kind of average times that it takes me to do different things. I am very big proponent of documenting. As you can see, like I go into a lot of minutia, right, with my clients. I'm that way in real life. So in my business, I do the same thing. I track everything. I track how much time it takes me from start to finish on every single case, whether it's legal documents, Altex planning, or a combination of them, because I need to know, are my fees commensurate with what I want to earn? I know what I want to earn. And if I'm not making that, fees are going to change. And I will tell you, in getting prepped for this, I went, oh, I hadn't looked at this for a couple of years. I probably need to make some fee changes. So anyway, that's kind of how that goes. All right, so I'm going to continue on. I want to spend just a little bit more time on this because I want you guys to kind of see what I'm doing here, and then we'll switch over to the CLDP stuff, okay? I want to talk a little bit about the transfers. So this is a spreadsheet that I created because I wanted to be able to look at a client's file and be prepared before Altex got involved in the case. So anytime somebody hires me, I actually ask for 5 years worth of stuff. This particular case, I didn't have that data yet. They have about they have more than 5 accounts. So theirs is going to probably be a little bigger than this. But on another case, what I did is I tracked all, they had 5 different accounts, and I tracked the balances on every single account for every month going back all the way 5 years. Okay. Now I purposely create this colored scheme over here to change for me to find significant things. So you can see here we have a deposit. Look at this, the month-to-month changes of the numbers went up and then they went down and then they went significantly down. And then there was a big bump up again. So you can see what's going on. I can tell you Altex is probably going to flag April, May, June, August, October, January, February, April, May, June. So you can see all these are potential months that Altex could flag for me. So by having the bank statements, I can actually go through and then look and see what happened that month. Did they pay taxes? Did they have a large tax bill? Did they buy a car? Did they put a deposit on a house? What was going on in that particular case? But you can see every month I track. The black means this account wasn't open during this period of time. So I put when it was opened, and then I have where it was closed. Right? But you can see there's significant chunks. Look, we had a $176,000 bump right here, right? On that particular case, they sold a house, right? And we can see big chunks of money leaving the accounts here. What happened? Well, they gave some gifts to their kids, right? And I found those. So that helps me to prepare for Altex, right? So when I see big chunks of money going in or out, I look at the statements. Is it something I can explain, or am I going to need more documentation? And then I get that documentation. It might just mean that they moved into assisted living, right? And or a nursing home, and now big chunks of money are disappearing out of the account. So it might be something fairly easy for me to document. I might just need an invoice or an accounting from the facility that tells me all the money that they paid out to that facility. But you can see there's big chunks of money and changes going on here. Look at, here's a $32,000 that just happened in November. So this really gives me a good idea what's going on in a case, and it also helps me to know where the money is fluctuating. Also, what I do is if I see, like here's a big change here in this account, I look to see what did something else happen over here that could help me explain it. So I look at the other statements. I've found lots of things, right? I find closed IRAs, I find life insurance policies that people cash in. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff that happens in people's lives. And my job is to go through and get it all prepared so that I can see, is this going to affect eligibility or not? So it's a lot, it's very time consuming because I spend hours sometimes downloading statements and then also looking at the details of every single statement. Okay. So lots of data, again, not for the faint-hearted. All right, let's switch over to income just so I can kind of show you how that works. Here's the list of all the incomes that are listed in the Altex policy manual. I've added a few new ones because I literally had somebody that, oh, my social media is not on here. In my paper app, I have social media. I need to add that here. I have somebody who earns money on TikTok. So I had to add that to my list of things. This particular person has Social Security and USOPM civil service retirement. Their spouse has Social Security and 2 pensions. So you can see here their income is pretty high. They're at $73.91.25. My screen automatically tells me this person is not eligible. It's run all the tests and this person doesn't qualify, but their income is below this $89,1270, so they could get an income only trust to income qualify. And as I mentioned earlier on this screen, I had already indicated that to you guys right here. Okay. The next thing that I just want to touch on is the share of cost worksheet. I just want to kind of show you guys how things work. Obviously, not everything is completed on here. I just kind of filled this out pretty fast. I didn't indicate it as an income only trust case because that's going to trigger some stuff in the background and I wasn't ready to do that yet. But you can see that Altex, in order to calculate the share of cost in room and board, is going to be based on the income, where they're living. This person happens to be living at home. So I'm going to pop open that worksheet so you guys can see that. If I was to change this to a nursing home, it's going to change that personal needs allowance. If I change it to assisted living, it changes it back to a higher number. There's their Medicare Part B premium, whether or not the Medicare buy-in has occurred. Again, they're not on Medicaid yet, so there's no buy-in yet. So in this particular case, this person goes on to Altex. She is going to have to pay $721 even for her services at home. That makes sense to everybody? And then the well spouse, we're going to calculate a spousal allowance. Remember I said SISMIA, so Community Spouse Monthly Income Allowance. The spouse gets 0 because her income is so high, right? So this is her total spousal allowance is $3,041. Her income is $3,763, so she doesn't get to keep any income from the institutionalized spouse, or the one that needs the program. Now, if I add a single premium immediate annuity here, let's say that that payment's going to be $500 a month. It doesn't affect the case over here because she already didn't get a spousal allowance, right? So adding the SPIA is not going to change anything. So it's a good option for this case. Okay. All right. Am I making everybody go to sleep? Sorry, it's a lot of detail. I wanted to share, I wanted to be forthright and just kind of help you guys understand kind of how all this works. Now, on the veterans benefits side of things, this customer is not a veteran. But if they were, this is kind of how we would calculate their eligibility. Their net worth of their countable assets is roughly $247,000. The net worth limit for a spousal case is $301,000. So they're underneath that limit there. They would be fine for that. And then we add in all of their income. Their total annual income is $88,000. But the veteran plus one dependent that needs aid in attendance, that's the highest income limit that I could give them, is $31,714. So right now they have no shortfall, right? The shortfall is a positive number. It's a negative. So it's a positive number. So they're not potentially eligible for any benefit. Now, if this person was paying nursing home bills, let's say they were paying $10,000 a month, they would be potentially eligible for a benefit. You see how that worked? So the more medical expenses they have for veterans benefits, the more likely they are to qualify for the program. If it was just a widow who needed aid in attendance, they still would qualify with the nursing home cost. Okay. Now, that's not a perfect example because if they're in a nursing home and they're on Medicaid, and they qualify for VA benefits, they just get to have $90. They don't get the $1,432. But just to kind of give you an idea how that works. So we're taking total income, subtracting unreimbursed medical expenses to calculate whether or not the person qualifies for help. These people are just paying right now a little bit for a little bit of care, and they have a family member caring for the loved one until they get on Altex. All right, the last thing that I want to touch on is the medical eligibility. And so on this page here, I just want to kind of go through all of the diseases that kind of can affect. Obviously, a lot of the things that I showed you on the other screen, I just ask yes or no questions on that if there's anything I need to know about that. Altex has gotten really tough on the medical side of things. I will tell you, people that used to just qualify, we're not getting like automatic qualifications anymore. We're really having to prove eligibility. So mobility is going to be things like how they get around their house, right? And then transferring is going to be how they get on and off things, how they get on the toilet, off the toilet, in bed, out of bed, on chairs, out of chairs, on a couch, off a couch, right? That's transferring. Bathing is going to be the actual act of bathing or showering. How do they get into the space to get bathed? And then how much assistance do they need with the actual bathing? Are they participating, or is somebody else doing it for them? You can see up here is a scoring chart. 0 means they're independent. 1 means they need supervision, occasional hands-on or prompting. 2 means they need hands-on assistance. And 3 means they're totally dependent on others. Okay. And in this particular case, I didn't put all their minutia details. That would be a lot of typing. We hand wrote everything on their paper application because we saw them in person. But this, I have to really ask and really dig and get into all of these details. So obviously this person is requiring quite a bit of hands-on assistance with most of her activities of daily living. And then not really showing any kind of cognitive impairment just yet, but showing some resistiveness to care, self-interest, disruptive behavior, things of that nature. So we do add that. Now, this particular person has Parkinson's disease, so they just haven't got, a lot of times Parkinson's does have a cognitive component. We're just not seeing evidence of that just yet. Reminder to mute, you guys. I can hear conversations in the background. Anyway, so I go through, Altex weights certain areas different ways. So activities of daily living are weighted 5. So when she has a weight rating of 2, the weight score of 5, she gets a final score of 10 in that particular category. Now, this is not it's not perfect. Obviously, I didn't do medical eligibility at Altex, but after 32 years of working in the industry, reading the policy manual and understanding what they're looking for and attending the medical assessments, I have a really good idea what they're looking for, and I have to help. Used to be, I didn't ever have to help with the medical. People were eligible or they weren't. But now I'm having to really listen to how the people are answering the questions for the medical assessor, and then I have to pipe in. So recently I had a case up in Prescott, and the facility I thought would be very helpful. I thought, they understand this customer very, very well. And they were answering as if he was independent. I'm like, you're forcing him to move into the dementia, the actual locked unit. I don't think he's independent. Let's be a little bit more clear about what's going on. So just very important to understand the parameters. Let's see, let me go back to some of the questions. Let me come back to the annuity question. The next question was the best avenue for a veteran to determine eligibility for benefits at the beginning besides us. There is a company that does this for free. Let me see if I can, I don't know if anybody's looking at my picture. Can you guys see me? Veteran Alliance. It's veteranallianceusa.org. They're a fantastic resource, and they're going to look at not only these benefits, but also whether or not they can get health benefits from the VA as well. Okay. I do have a few other resources, but again, I won't spend too much time there. I want to try to get through this. What are the shoe-in qualifications for medical? Is dementia mostly a sure thing? Absolutely not. Used to be that we could pretty much, if somebody had a dementia diagnosis, we were good to go. Now that dementia diagnosis has to be diagnosed by a neurologist, which means they have to go through some neurological testing to have that dementia diagnosis. And as I kind of show here, it has to be moderate to severe. I don't know if you guys can see that. It has to be moderate to severe diagnosis right here. If it's not moderate or severe, they don't get this 20 points. But you can see if it is neurologist based and it's moderate or severe, they get 20 points automatically, which really bumps up their score. It's a third their score if they can get that. Really, the big area is here, right? Needing assistance with their activities of daily living. So if they can get a 2 or a 3 in some areas, then they're going to get those higher scores. That's probably the best way. Do you coach the family to not overemphasize what the person can do in terms of ADLs? Great question. So my job is to be honest, right? And ethical, right? I want to make sure that I'm giving people the right information. What I always tell people is this: don't describe a person's best day, right? If they're more than 50% of the time requiring assistance, hands-on assistance, more than 50% of the time, they're going to probably be a 2. And you need to talk about that. I think it's important for my customers, because a lot of my customers are still competent. They still know what's going on, but they don't necessarily want to be honest about how, they're wetting themselves, or, they pooped on the way to the bathroom. You know what I mean? Nobody really wants to talk about that. That's kind of an embarrassing thing to talk about. So when I talk to my clients and their family members, I say to them, this is not the time to be proud. This is the time to talk about what your actual needs are. If you're pooping your pants on the way to the toilet, you need to talk about that. That's not something to be ashamed about. That's reality, right? It's your reality. You have to deal with this on a daily basis. If you're not remembering things, that's okay. You know, I always tell my people, let the customer, if the customer wants to participate and they want to answer questions, let them. But we always tell the medical assessor ahead of time, out of dignity, we're going to allow them to answer, but we're going to clarify some things and hopefully help them to explain some things to you. And if they're not honest with you, is it okay if I have a separate meeting with you after to kind of explain where they weren't being completely honest? Because it is hard. I will say it's hard, right? As we get older, things start happening, you know, I can't always open jars anymore. I'm starting to have some arthritis in my hand. My thumb is not always working the way it should, or maybe there's pain in opening a jar, and I have to have somebody help me with that. That's not something I want to go around and advertise per se, but for this situation, we want to advertise. We want to talk about it. I don't coach people to lie. I never want somebody to lie to get benefits, but I want them to be honest and ethical. And by me doing this ahead of time with them, they know, right? I'm pretty picky with how I ask questions and how I score them. And if they can go through that with me and we get enough score, I feel confident they could do it on their own. If not, I'm on the phone. I don't really let my clients do their medicals without me anymore. Okay. When you speak for a client during medical qualification, in what capacity? So for Altex, I am what's known as an authorized representative. The customer has authorized me to represent them. Altex knows about my 32 years of experience, so most of the staff is very aware of who I am. And if they don't, I tell them, right? I have 32 years of experience. I'm not trying to tell you how to do your job, but just know I'm going to pipe in. I'm going to pipe in. When I do the financial stuff, half the time the workers don't interview me because I've already sent them this questionnaire, right? I've made it where it makes sense for that particular client. I've fixed the screens to only disclose what we're supposed to disclose. If I have other notes or whatever, I create another screen so that they don't see my notes. But I go in there and I give them facts, and then I support it with information, right? Hard copy documentation. Okay. So authorized representative is what I am. All right. So I'm going to open it up for a couple minutes for some questions. Anybody have any thoughts, concerns, issues?
There were several questions in the chat you may want to look at.
Okay. Those are the ones that I was answering. Oh, is there more maybe? Let me see. No, I think I answered them.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so on the SPIA, going back to the question that Allison had, the single premium immediate annuity must meet some very specific requirements. Rather than me spewing that data out to you guys, I will tell you that's public knowledge. It's in the Altex policy manual. So if you want to look that up, single premium immediate annuities, you can just type that into their search in their policy manual, and it'll take you to all the sections that talk about that. It'll talk about what's a compensated annuity, right? So it's got to be compensated. It has to meet certain criteria. The big kicker with the SPIAs is that your spouse can be named as a contingent beneficiary. So in my case today, the one I showed you, that we're going to do the SPIA, and the one wife is going to be the one that's not sick. She's going to be the one that's going to be the recipient, right? She's going to be the annuitant, because we're actually taking her 401k money, so we have to make it in her name. But we can name her spouse, who's going to be on Altex, in first position to receive any continuing income off of that if she should die first. Now, the kicker with this annuity is that Access or Altex has to be either primary or contingent annuity depending on the situation. So a spouse, a disabled adult child, or a minor child can be in first position after the annuitant, but then in secondary position or in first, if they don't have any of those individuals, has to be Access. So I don't necessarily always use the SPIA, because especially if somebody wants to take it out long term, they want to do a 10-year payment plan. I don't necessarily want Access to get that money. I'm trying to preserve my clients' assets. So I try to, as much as I can, do very short-term annuities when I can. I actually have a company that I work with. We can take the annuity down to 3 months if we wanted to. Now they have to pay extra for that, but sometimes people want their money back that fast. I haven't yet been able to create a 3-month annuity and make it work, because usually it's money, right? If we did a three payments of $30,000, that's going to affect our eligibility. So I don't necessarily do that, but I have the capability of doing that, which is nice. Okay. That help, Allison? All right. Great questions, you guys. Just absolutely fantastic. I really, really appreciate everybody chiming in and helping. So just real quick before I turn it over to Dawn, because I think you probably want to do it. Do you want to do another code word now between my speaking engagements, or do you want me to go straight into the next
I
topic?
do. Yeah, that would be
Okay.
great.
All right. So
Okay,
before I give it back to you, just a quick reaction. And if you don't want to participate, you don't have to. Do I get a thumbs up, a heart, some applause, a happy face, or just a wow face? How do you guys want to react to me today? There's not a sad face. I'm sorry. Can't give me a thumbs down. I guess you could do that in person. Is everything okay? Do you guys like it? Awesome. Thank you, guys. All right, Dawn, you can take over now.
Okay. All right. So the second word of the day, and remember we have 3 words throughout the day, random words that I choose as a verification process. You want to write these words down and then email them to me at the end of the webinar, and I will respond with your certificate of completion as well as the handouts that Carol and I are using today in the various presentations. So the second word of the day, which I will hold up, is PIN, P-I-N, PIN. This is the second word of the day. Write it down, remember it, and send it to me along with the other 2 words. And I will respond with your certificate of completion later today, or actually probably tomorrow. So, okay. And I think, let's see, I just want to look. Yeah, I believe we've got 63 people in the meeting. I think everybody's here. Hopefully nobody walked away from their computer and went to the bathroom, but this is the second word. Okay, Carol, take it back.
All right. Okay, so as you guys know, I've been in business for a while, a lot of years here. So what I wanted to do, and I've done this presentation before for you guys. I did it during COVID. I think it was in year 2020 that I did this presentation. So it may be regurgitating some old information, but I still think that the kinds of things that I talk about can be valuable. You know, is my way the only way? Of course not. We're all in business for ourselves. Very few of us want to work for somebody else, right? We like working for ourselves, or maybe we're working for another CLDP to get some more education. So I want to just share some great information with you. And again, take it or leave it. It's just, it is what it is, right? You do you. Oh, let me get things all set up again. Sorry. Okay. So we're now going to be talking about growing and protecting your CLDP business. And the questions that I want to ask you guys are, oh, remember to mute yourselves, guys. All right. Sorry. Just I can hear myself echoing whenever there's somebody that has me on, because I can hear me on your screen. All right. So being in business for yourself is a lot of work, and it's one of the challenges that I'm finding is it's hard to sometimes step away from the work, right? Because you have a passion for what you do. Most of us wouldn't be doing what we're doing unless we actually had a passion for helping people. I love helping people, right? That is something I love to do, and it's hard for me to say no. As I'm getting older, I now know I can't do as much as I once could, but in the process of building my business, I learned a lot of things and I implement a lot of things that I think could be helpful to you. And again, many of you have been in business just as long as me. I mean, some of us have been going to these things for over 20 years. So you guys know, just as much as me and could probably present this yourself. But the big thing that has been very, very helpful for me is outlining my workflow and procedures for each task. So my question to you, and again, you don't have to answer out loud, but just think about this. How many of you are outlining your workflow and your procedures for each task? How many of you track your time? Remember I said earlier, I track my time from start to finish on every single case because it helps me to know, am I making the money that I want to make, or am I just giving away the service for free, basically? How many of you are tracking your costs? Do you actually keep track of your costs for everything that you're doing on a case? Binders, dividers, paper, tabs, whatever it is that you're doing. Do you know how much you're making per hour for the work that you do? As I mentioned to you earlier, I make $180 an hour for my consulting work. Well, I don't necessarily make $180 an hour for all of the actual work that I do, because obviously if I did that, I would probably be retired already. I try to have reasonable fees, but how is it reasonable, right? Is it reasonable for the amount of time that I'm spending on something? So it's very important. And then what tools are you using to track these things? The first thing that I significantly encourage people to do is to write procedures, create task sheets, and write them in a way that a fifth grader could do the task. And the reason why I do that is because you may find at some point that you're going to hire an assistant or assistants, or you want somebody to come and help, or you want to train. And you can't necessarily sit with somebody 24 hours a day to teach them everything that they need to know. But if you've created procedures and a procedure or an operations manual, and you've created a task sheet, then somebody else can just look at that and do it. And the reason I say write it like a fifth grader is because, generally speaking, I would hope that most people you're hiring have at least a fifth grade education, right? Or more. And so we want to make sure that anybody could understand it. I always tested my procedures on my young children when they were young. I would say, see if you can do this task. And I would hand them the sheet, and I would let them go with it. And if they could do it, then I knew that I wrote that appropriately, in a way that anybody could understand. So it's a great, great use of time and energy. I just use this one as an example. I was very specific. So when I first started, one of the things that I did is I was kind of generic, like I would just do quick little steps. And then I read a book that talked about you need to be more specific than that. You need to make sure that you understand all the little intricate details of what needs to be done, so literally the person can do it accurately. And I will tell you, I had a worker one time who was doing not post office procedures, but stamping mail. And I had a Pitney Bowes machine at that time. And one of the steps in the list was to weigh each piece of mail. So the person weighed the first one, and then they just put the same postage on everything else. Well, the problem was they weighed the one piece that was heavier that I had put in the pile. And so they stamped everything with that higher postage amount. When I went back and I weighed each piece, all of them were just 1 ounce or less. They didn't need a 2-ounce postage. So think about how much money that was. It was, I think, 250 mailing. So I lost a little chunk of change that day because I couldn't undo the Pitney Bowes stamp on all those envelopes. So just important, right, to be as specific as possible. The second thing that I use is time logs. Time logs are super important because it's important for us to know how much time it's taking to do any part of our task. This particular example is what I use for my legal docs, right? I know there's certain things that I'm going to have to do on my legal docs. And actually, I've even updated it since this one. But you can see I'm going to have data, time to call, my initial call, prepping the file, keying things into databases, data collection, my document prep time, appointment prep time, if I'm driving to an appointment, what my signing appointment was, what fees that I incurred, how much time it takes me to go to and from recorders' offices, or the time that I spent doing stuff online, sending up my campaigns, any postage, what my binder cost, what the folders cost, what the dividers cost, and then again, any other databases or things that I need to do data entry into. So this also helps me to know, can I hire somebody? Is there something on this list that I can hire somebody else to do, right? So just to give you an idea of something that I do. And I track. Sometimes they're not as specific as this. Sometimes I use a generic time log, but I literally time log every case that I do. So how long does it take, and how much does it cost for all the stuff that you're doing? So tracking information about your business. Do you know how much time you spend on projects? Do you know your hourly wage for that task? Do you know if your business is growing or declining? You can't know that unless you're actually tracking that information. So these are some of the headers of some of the time logs that I keep. So I keep a time log, or like I track timing on some of my Altex cases. How long was it when I applied? When is the due date? When did they actually approve the due date? You know, the average processing time from start to finish on that. I also track for every single case the fees that were spent, the fee that was earned, the fees that were paid, what my hourly rate was based on that, the year that I did it, the average time per case, my average fee earned, my average hourly rate. So you could just see, just trying to keep track of that really is very, very helpful. I also keep track of month over month, how much money I make every single month, and then how much I made per year, and then what was my average for that year. That also helps me to see where I have increases or declines in business. So for some reason, I don't know why, January is always a crazy month for me, not just in terms of our Medicare stuff, but also Altex and legal docs. I have record Januaries almost every year. I don't know why. Probably everybody coming back from holiday, they're ready to get to work, I guess. Your calendar appointments, what are the tasks that are associated with the project? How much time does it take to get those tasks done? Who's doing the task? And then I actually set appointments on my calendar to actually block time for that. So I use customer, what do you call it? CRM. I use a CRM program. And on that calendar, I actually block times out for everything that I'm doing on a case so that I can know how much new work that I can take on. Right now, in being in business for all this time, I have really slowed down quite a bit because I just don't want to be as busy as I was when I was 28 years old. So by keeping a log and keeping everything on my calendar, it's much easier for me to say, oh, I'm booking out to April. Like right now, I'm literally booking out to April. So if somebody wants to come in and see me, unless it's a, hospice case, I'm probably not going to see them until April. And they need to know that. I need to be honest with them that I can't take on their case if I don't have any time to take on their case, right? And it's okay. I don't mind sharing the wealth. If somebody else can take on the case sooner, by all means, let them do that. Sometimes people are willing to wait for me. They want my experience and my expertise, and that's okay too. So I actually set the time. This is like an example whenever I'm doing legal doc prep for estate planning, portfolios, and trusts. This is kind of what I've blocked out in terms of time to do all of the different tasks associated with it. And I literally go on my calendar and block these times out, you guys. So in a few minutes, I'll actually show you my calendar. I think I can show you a page where you can kind of see how crazy my calendar looks. But it's really good for me because it helps me to understand everything that I got to do in any given day. Okay. The next thing that I like to do is have preset master system folders. I don't know if other people do this, but I'm kind of really crazy when it comes to this. I create master folders. I add all my documents, worksheets, flyers, whatever I need into that folder. And then I copy and paste that when creating my customers folder. So I'm going to go out just for a second so you guys can kind of see what I've done is I have several of my master folders that I created here. And here's my legal docs one. Now, do I need everything that's in here? No, not necessarily. I have subfolders that I'm going to put stuff in, after when the clients give me information or when I do information. But I have all these things in here that could apply to a legal docs case. So depending on what they're hiring me for, so let's say they're hiring me for an estate planning portfolio, I'm going to use these things, obviously, but not necessarily just the financial power of attorney stuff. So I might delete all that. I might delete my small estate affidavit stuff. I just try to have as much information in here as I possibly can so it makes my life easier. Here's another example of my income only trust. These are all the subfolders that I create for it. These are all the potential documents that I might need for it. By keeping it in a master folder, then I only have one place that I have to update a document. So for example, I always have to update my income only trust every year with new numbers. I have packets, my kits that people are buying basically as part of the package when they get their trust and all their instructions. So I have those kits that I create and I have to update every year, but I have one place to go look for it, right? I don't have to go, oh, where did I stick that one thing, right? It's all in one place so I can easily find it. Here's an example of an Altex folder. Just this is really the entire process in order of all the things that I have to do on a case. And then after approval, what are some things that I need to deal with? Okay, so just as an example. All right, so I copy and paste, I delete the items that are not applicable to the customer, I update as needed, and again, create one place for everything. All right, my next thing that I want to talk about, again, I only have till 11, so I'm zooming through this. You are going to be getting PDFs, so not of the PowerPoint, but PDFs that I put together for you guys. So you'll have those to reference some of the information. On the marketing, I just really want to encourage people to consider doing what I call campaigns, right? Ongoing marketing campaigns. I will tell you, doing campaigns, which is marketing to your customers periodically throughout the year, has been the single biggest bump in my legal documents business that I could have ever hoped for. I started off doing send out cards, and I'm going to share that with you in a few minutes as well. But for a lot of my current customers, if I don't want to send a card, sometimes I just create flyers, and I'm going to give you guys, I'm going to show you guys that as well. See, I didn't put it in my folder. I don't think I put it in my folder. Let me see. No, I didn't, but I can go in my legal docs. And then right here, I have my campaign. Let me open that up and I'll show you guys what I mean. I basically create flyers that I'm going to send out throughout the year. I have in here what month I'm going to send them out in. So you can see a 3 there. This is a 6-month. This is an 8-month. This is their anniversary. We do Medicare. So if they're on Medicare, I send them out the information on annual enrollment. This flyer system where I just create the flyers and mail them out, I get them all ready. As soon as my case is done, I print them all out, put them all in envelopes, put the date on the envelope of when they get mailed out, and then I mail them out throughout the year. This happy docuversary gets me more business than you can imagine, you guys. If you do not do this, I'm telling you, make this one change right to your business and you will see your business grow, because people forget that even though you did stuff for them, they still forget. And so if you remind them on their anniversary, hey, it's been a year since we've talked. Hey, it's been 2 years since we've talked. Is it time to update your documents? All of a sudden, people are calling you. You're not having to follow up with anybody there because you just sent them out a little mailer. I like this one. You're rocking it. It's not promoting anything per se. It's just saying hope you're having a great day, right? So I just try to do a little bit of something. I also send out birthday cards. It's a huge boon for my business. People love it. They love birthday cards. If I can remember a person's actual wedding anniversary, man, that's some cheese. they love that. So just little things like that you can do to perk up your business, so helpful. And that, I will tell you, by far has been my biggest growth. Not even going out to meetings, just relying on my customers' word of mouth. Because even if they don't need you, all of a sudden somebody comes into their life that needs you and they go, oh, I just got a flyer from my CLDP. Here, take their flyer and call them up. It's awesome. Also, just planning your year. What's your target market? Always have your begin and end dates. Pay attention to the costs and then pay attention to the outcome. Okay, it's very, very important to track all of that. That's why I'm saying I could see a big boost in my business, because I tracked all that to see, was it actually having an impact? I've done a lot of different marketing throughout the years, and I find that my biggest marketing is really to my customers. If I can send my customers some brownies, they remember me for life. They love my brownies. And I have a company that does that. They send out the brownies for me. So reminding people to use your social media. I personally haven't found social media to be a great resource for customers, but it's a great resource for referral sources, especially if you're like on LinkedIn and you have a lot of groups that you belong to. It's a really good way for people to learn a little bit about you. I also still use business cards, brochures, flyers, and mailers, not as much as I used to. Mostly I do these campaigns and then hosting events, direct mail, gifts, things of that nature. Here's an example of a agency marketing data sheet where what was the campaign type, the begin and end date, what I did, and then the cost associated with it, and what was the outcome, right? So I kind of track all of that. Okay. I use send out cards for a lot of my mailers, that not exclusively, but I do like it because it allows you to stay connected with your customers. You can do the online app or the phone app in less than 60 seconds. You can get a card out. It's a pretty sweet deal. I have a lot of custom cards that I created, and I have a lot of custom campaigns that I created. So that allows me to just say, okay, I want to trigger this campaign and then send out cards, worries about printing, mailing, stuffing the envelope, stamping the envelope, addressing the envelope. They do all that work. And I just press a button and say, I want to send this campaign to this person. And then I have it set up when I want the card sent out, and they do all the rest of the work. I like it. It costs a little bit more than doing it yourself, but when you actually break down the time, whenever I do like a hand project where I have to either print labels or handwrite labels or, get things ready, it's a lot of time. And I don't have a lot of time. I'm pretty much by myself, just me and George here. So anything I can do to basically hire somebody to do that work for me is always good. Send Out Cards has the best brownies. I don't know if you guys have ever gotten Send Out Cards brownies, but if you want some, you guys can reach out to me and I'll send you some. They're amazing. They're delicious, and your customers will love them. All right. I'm going to I put information in your packet, so I'm not going to spend too much time going over the packages. I will tell you, for a long time when I was being very, when I needed business, I did the Heartfelt or the Unlimited Heartfelt, where I could send out cards every single day. They have a program where if you send out individualized cards, not campaigns, like I want to send a happy birthday card to 10 different people and I'm going to pick 10 different cards to send to them, they pay the postage, which is a pretty sweet deal. You pay one fee and they do the rest. They also have card packages. You could also add it as a way to add extra income back to your business. I do this especially if I'm doing a lot of campaigns and a lot of like sending people stuff, because as an affiliate, I earn money back, like 20% back. And that just helps me pay for my marketing. So just as an example. The other thing that I want to talk about with regard to growing is diversification. What other services or ideas can you incorporate into your business? As I said, I originally started my business as an Altex planner. And then I saw that I needed to do legal documents. So I started doing legal documents. And then we just kept getting tons and tons of Medicare questions. And I was like, well, you know what? That could easily segue in a lot of our conversations. So we added the Medicare insurance component. Medicare insurance leads to long-term care insurance. So it's kind of like this snowball effect. You start and you add some things that make sense, that are natural fits for your business, and your business will grow. Are there other tools or resources you can sell? One of the things that's coming up, I use Trust software for all my estate planning work and life care planning work, and they're getting ready to implement one where people can go and do it themselves. So that's going to be kind of nice, and you can make money off of that. I also participate with another company that kind of already does that. People still like me though, so I don't get a lot of do-it-yourselfers, but it's there in case somebody wants to do that. And then anything you already invest in and use that you can talk about or add as part of your marketing campaigns. So as you saw in my marketing campaign, one of the things that I do is Medicare, right? So I have this annual election one that goes out on September 1st to let people know, hey, don't forget, we also do Medicare, right? They either will do it or they won't, but anything to trigger some extra business. All right, so let's switch. We have just a few minutes left. We're going to talk about protecting your business. This is so important to me because in our world, people are constantly trying to get us. I feel like that sometimes. I don't know if any of you have been reported to the CLDP board, but I have multiple times because my competitors don't want me to be in business, especially lawyers. That's all who's filed complaints against me is just lawyers. So I've overcome all of them, but it's kind of a pain in the butt to get there. But in addition to that, there are some things that I just want you guys to think about. And one is errors and omissions. I had a hard time finding a company that would do this, that wasn't charging such astronomical fees. They wanted to treat me like a lawyer, and they were wanting to charge me between $5,000 and $10,000. This company, I have a program that costs me about $1,400 a year, and it's errors and omissions, and they give you the opportunity to go retroactive. So I pay the extra fee to go back to prior to having that policy, right? So any errors or omissions that I made in prior cases, it gives me an opportunity to protect myself against that. We are affiliated with Fox Point. We do earn a commission for new enrollments. You don't have to go through us, but they are pretty awesome. Liability insurance, commercial packages, and business owners policies, especially for liability in your office spaces or just in your protecting your stuff, right? Your computers, your software, your papers, right? If there's a lot of files that you have, if all of a sudden that goes up in flames, how are you going to recover that? Do you have money to help cover the cost of recovering all of your case files by having to go back out to your customers and ask for information again? I get my insurance through Mark DeRico. He's a country financial agent. There's no kickbacks. He's just a really nice guy. I really like him. Workers' compensation, making sure that you have that. I have used the Hartford for years. Again, there's more than the Hartford, but that's just who I've been using. It gives your employees benefits if they have a work-related injury or illness, and it just doesn't hurt to have as much protection as possible, you guys. There's a question in the chat. What is the difference between a CRM and Outlook? So a CRM is a customer relationship manager. The particular one that I use is Agency Block. It's really designed for insurance agents, but I find that it works very well for all of our businesses. We are insurance agents as well. But the CRM has other features in it, right? So it has a lot of the features rather than you having to have separate spreadsheets for everything. It's keeping track of all your customers, all their birthdays. You can create reports. You can create email campaigns. So there's just a lot. You can also pay for the money package where it can track how much income you're making. So it just kind of solidifies and puts a whole bunch of things together in one package for your customers. It's also nice. We have it integrated with our phone, with our VoIP phone system, which we have through Intols. And Intols will actually track every call. We can actually record every call, and it'll actually be saved in our CRM. So it's pretty amazing. It pops up, people's names. You can easily get to your customer. When a call comes in, it'll actually have that information handy for you. So it's super helpful and beneficial just for keeping and tracking information. All right, back to workers' comp. Workers' compensation provides medical care, replace most of their wages while they take time to recover, provide disability benefits, and pay for their funeral if they lose their life. So that's a really good program to have. So that's insurance. Now we want to talk about protecting personally identifiable information. All of us are dealing with PII. So this is name, address, sometimes their license, their photo, dates of birth, social security numbers, their account numbers, and more. So as you can see with my customers, right, I collect all this data. I have everything really pretty much. And so I have to be very careful about how I protect their data. This is kind of an example of some of the things there. PII, so all of this is relating to HIPAA privacy practices. Just know what you have, keep only what you need, protect the info you keep, dispose of it when you're no longer needing it, and create a plan to respond to any kind of accidental disclosures, okay? So scale down, lock it, pitch it, plan it, right? Those are all the things you've got to do to protect it. HIPAA is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. It was enacted in 1996. It does primarily affect health plans, healthcare providers, healthcare clearinghouses, and business associates. Now, I know that some of you are thinking, well, I don't really do that. But if you are keeping any PII, which is that protecting that individually identifiable information, you're still going to be covered by this. If you have an accidental disclosure, you could be at risk. So just protect yourself by putting in place the things that you need to put in place. Reasonable diligence. Did you know the violation occurred? That's the lowest form, up to willful neglect or not correcting an issue. Penalties range from $100 to $50,000 per violation. So it's worth looking into and putting things into place. Knowingly obtaining, disclosing, or committing under false pretenses, intending to sell or use for personal gain, those penalties are stronger, $50,000 to $250,000 and imprisonment. So just make sure you're not knowingly doing anything. What's the easiest thing you can do when you walk away from your computer? Hit Windows L or Control, do lock your screen. Control Alt Delete or the Windows and the L button. Lock your screen every time you're away. If I'm in with a customer and I have to go out to the copy machine, I lock my screen. I have to always key in my password when I get back, but it's just one more way to protect myself from improper disclosure. Put information away. I don't leave client files out when other clients are with me. I put everything behind me. You can see I have this lovely curtain here, and I have all my client files back here. You can kind of see that. No full name, so we're okay for disclosure now, but I still take the extra step and close everything off so that my customers can't see what's going on behind me, okay? Lock your office or your desk and put passwords on everything. If you are going to have your laptop out, you need to make sure you lock that baby up every single time, because if somebody steals your laptop from your car, you're going to be in trouble. Now, inside your office, make sure that you're using firewalls to protect your computers. It just gives one more blockage for them to be able to intercept any of the data that you have locally on any servers or computers that you have. We use WatchGuard. We've used them for many, many, many years. Firewalls, anti-malware, antivirus, and network protection. Really like them. And then encrypted emails. That's super important if you're going to be doing any kind of personally identifiable or medical type information. You need to have encrypted email. So obviously I'm dealing with Altex, which is a medical based program. I deal with a lot of medical records, so I have to keep very tight controls on how things get disclosed. One of the challenges that I have, of course, is, we have to send draft documents to our customers. Well, if their documents have their address and their date of birth on them, you now have plus their name, three personally identifiable pieces of information. If you have the list of what they own on their schedules, now we have bunch more information. So it's important that you are not sending that without encryption, okay? We are currently using Neo Certified. We were using Virtru, but it's very, very expensive. So we decided to go to this Neo Certified licensing, and it's so nice, you guys. It really is super amazing. It's easy. You can track who's opened your emails. It's very helpful for me with Altex, because they'll say to me, well, you didn't disclose something, or you didn't report that. And I'm like, yeah, I did. You didn't open the email. You have to open the email so that you can have the information. So just making sure you know about that. Very nice company, very reasonable cost for encryption. Faxing. SR Fax has a HIPAA compliant faxing capability. So we've been using SR Fax for many, many years. Now we're doing more, through the encrypted system to send things to Altex or to send things to our clients. But if I have a client that needs something sent by fax, I have a HIPAA compliant version of that to be able to encrypt that from end to end. All right, that was a lot of information. I know we talked about a lot of things, and I'm sorry that I just ran through that so fast, but I think that a lot of it was helpful. I hope it was helpful. Does anybody have any questions? Any thoughts? Anything that you want to share?